Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku had Reaper Quirk Part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see Part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story lightningtw from 𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗧𝗟. So let's start the video. Prologue. Ages 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗏, 4 years old. Izuku's green hair stood out in the doctor's pale office, his little legs swinging back and forth as he waited for the answer. Not just any answer, the answer. His young thoughts were filled with excitement. I wonder what my quirk will be. I want to show Kaken it when I can. He already has his amazing quirk. I hope mine is just as cool. Then we can be heroes together. The Dr. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗧𝗏 returned to the room, results in hand. All your tests have returned, really? Izuku interrupted him. Izuku, I know you're excited to see the results, but please let Dr. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧 speak, his mother commented as she chuckled. She herself was nervous to see the results. Her mother was quirkless, which gave her young Izuku a probability of not having a quirk. If her son was quirkless, she knew he would be heartbroken, something she could never hope for her child, or any child for that matter. Not in today's society. Izuku jolted before letting out many quick apologies to the doctor, his young, high-pitched voice speaking so fast that at points neither adults present could understand his apologies. Both adults chuckled. His young mind, full of hope, full of excitement, may have been let down in another universe, but that will not happen in this one. Not now, at least. It's quite all right, Dr. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧 replied. You're just excited to know the results. The doctor paused to chuckle again. The results came back. You definitely have a quirk, yeah. Did you hear that, Mom? The doctor says I have a quirk. Izuku yelled out. He had known there was a chance he wouldn't have won, despite his mother's attempts to hide that fact. But his young brain didn't comprehend what the consequences would have been if he didn't have one. Yes, honey, I heard, and I'm so proud of you. Inko replied. A smile graced her features. Turning to the doctor, she let out a small, sorry he interrupted you again. He's just so excited to hear this. It's fine. Many children his age are like this when receiving the news. I've even had children activate their quirk for the first time while here. It's no worry, honestly, he replied. A glimmer of what Inko assumed was happiness shined in his eye. Anyways, don't worry about your son. He should show signs of whatever his quirk is within the next few months. It's not too uncommon for children to develop their quirk months after turning 4. It's nothing to worry about. Inko nodded, her son lost in thought where he was seated. Do you have any clue what it could possibly be? I assume that's what the blood test was for. You're perceptive, he replied. That is indeed what the blood test is for. Each quirk has multiple parts of DNA that it inhabits. Quirks that are similar show up similarly when sequenced, even if the individuals are unrelated. Through this we can give a list of possible quirks. Inko nodded. She hadn't known any of that. Must be new knowledge within the medical field, she thought. I've printed a paper here. He holds it out, with the full list of possibilities. But to keep it short, it is very possible that he has some form of healing or mental quirk. Dr. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧 hands the stack of papers over to her. Inko gratefully took the paper. Will that be all? She asked curiously. Yes, that is all. If you ever have any questions, just send me an email or call me, Dr. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧 responded before holding the door open for her and her son. Inko smiled and nodded before picking up Izuku, who is still thinking. He's probably thinking about what possible quirk he has. Once out the door, she looked back towards the doctor, who seemed to have a small glint in his eyes. She thought it was just him thinking about something. She wasn't wrong, but she would never be able to guess what he was thinking of. 1 week later, Izuku ran through the forest with his best friend, Bakugo Katsuki, or as Izuku called him, Kaken. They were playing a game of tag, quirks included. Well, quirks included for those who currently had quirks. The green-haired boy hadn't yet manifested his, but he knew it was only a matter of time. His mother had told him that his quirk was likely either a healing or mental quirk, so many possibilities. When he had been told that, he went and immediately called his father, who was working abroad. He was very happy for his father, who was a hero named Dragon. Yes, he couldn't see his father anymore, but his father was doing good and saving people. When his father had answered the phone, he was very happy and proud for his son, and promised to return soon to give a proper congratulations. Izuku had given a happy screech at the idea of his father returning. Izuku continued running from Kaken, who was using his small blasts to try to catch up. He giggled while looking back at his friend's face. Kaken looks so determined to catch me, he thought before running straight into a tree, his nose giving a sickening crunch. Kaken immediately caught up and turned Izuku around. Deku. Another way to read Izuku's name. Kaken didn't say it as an insult. I heard something go crunch. Was it your damn nose? Izuku nodded before feeling something strange. Rapidly his pain started to dissipate, as his nose started fixing itself. Kaken's eyes widened. Your quirk. It's appeared. Fucking finally. Izuku's eyes glimmered in excitement. I have a healing quirk. Kaken, what did it look like? I need to know. It looked gross as shit. Izuku giggled. Well yeah, I could feel how it moved. Izuku and Kaken both rapidly forgot their game of tag as they ran to Izuku's house to tell his mom. 4 years to 6 years old. A day after Izuku's quirk had appeared, his father returned to Japan. The second he had laid eyes on his son, he had scooped him up in a gigantic bear hug and began speaking excitedly to Izuku about his quirk. Hasashi had been majorly worried about Izuku's possible quirks, but not for the same reasons as Inko. He had a feeling his son would have a quirk, he was just worried about what it would be. Throughout the next 2 years, Deku got bullied for his healing quirk. Bakugo was almost constantly swearing at the other kids, telling them off for the way they reacted to Deku's quirk. A healing quirk isn't something bad. It's fucking amazing. A bastard got so lucky getting such a quirk. Sure, it isn't such a hero's quirk. It isn't like my explosions, but it ain't fucking useless. It ain't like half of their shitty quirks. Izuku had found so many new hero videos. He watched them again and again, every day. He would analyze every part of it, how they moved, how they used their quirks, everything. Eventually, he began writing everything down, ensuring he would never forget anything. His father, who chose to stop going abroad, began helping him analyze the videos, showing him some of the things he had missed. When Hasashi had started doing this, Inko would watch from Izuku's doorways with a smile on her face and tears in her eyes. Shortly after Hasashi had begun helping Izuku analyze everything, he began teaching him how support items had been structured. Long before he had become a hero, Hasashi had been in the support course at 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘. He didn't get his hero license until much later. He was no longer in school when he got that license. He hadn't been in school for many years at that point. 7 years old, Izuku had come home from school to his house. The atmosphere of his house was different. It no longer felt happy. It felt wrong. Wrong. Izuku heard the news on the TV as it was reporting a car crash on the news. He carefully went over to the TV and saw the headline, Hero Caught in Car Crash. Below it, the subheading continued with, Pro Hero Dragon Killed in a Car Crash on His Way to Izuku froze. He may be young, but he was intelligent. He knew what death meant. He knew it meant his father was gone. He rushed to his mom's room and found her crying on her bed. He ran to her and gave her a hug, finally letting his own tears fall. End of prologue. Age 9. When Izuku was 9, he still only had one friend, Kaken. He didn't mind. That wouldn't stop him from becoming a hero someday. A regeneration quirk is fucking amazing. Kaken had continuously said over the years. Every time Kaken said it, it made him happy. Don't bully Deku over it. He's better than all you shitty extras. He would always continue. Kaken was always protecting him, not from the injuries. They both knew that those would always heal, but from the words. Izuku almost always cried if people were mean to him. As expected, he didn't understand why people could be so harsh with their words. Perhaps one day, he may come to understand why people acted like that. I could pull you out of your school and transfer you, sweetheart, his mother had offered on multiple occasions. That way they can't say such rude things. It's all right. I've got Kaken to protect me. If you're sure, she had responded with concern. Yeah, how could I be a hero if I just ran away? Oh, Izuku shook off the memory. I don't want to go to a different school. I don't need to. He didn't feel like it was necessary. It's not like it was that bad. He only cried 10 times a day. That wasn't too much. Okay, it was bad, but he could handle it. He was strong. Izuku was walking home alone today as Kaken had been checked out early to have his hearing checked. Kaken has been using his quirk a lot recently. Explosions commonly cause people to lose their hearing. I wonder if he will begin to lose his. I hope not. Hearing aids can be expensive. He paused his walking to take in his surroundings. He was next to a park that he used to go to. He doesn't really now, but he has some good memories there. He also has some bad memories there. He continues on his way home. Wrong. When he reached his home, something felt off. Again, the last time he had felt this same level of dread had been when his father died. Wrong. He turned the door and entered his house, his mother instantly greeting him. She had the week off from her job. It was technically her vacation week, but they weren't able to go on a proper vacation. So she was home, for the most part. Izuku, I'm sorry, but I have to quickly head to the mall. Unusual, she got enough groceries for a whole week yesterday. She probably forgot something, or I need to get some milk. We ran out earlier. That. Izuku hesitated before responding, the dread still creeping up his spine. Okay, which mall? Probably Kiashi. How was school? Did anyone say or do anything? Izuku shook his head. Surprisingly, no one bothered me after Kaken left, and no one even taunted me today. Inko grimaced. I really wish it was like that all the time. They shouldn't be taunting you or attacking you. I know. He cast a downward glance before perking back up. But hey, at least I have Kaken. Her gaze gained a sad glint in it as she gave a small, downcast smile. Yeah, at least you have Katsuki. She turned and moved out the door. I should be back by 5:30, maybe 6 if traffic decides to hold me back. He nodded with a smile before she left, closing the door behind her. The dread grows like mold. decomposing all that it touches. Izuku shuddered. It had been a half an hour since his mother had left, and the dread had only grown. Why? It has to be nothing, his rational mind thought. After all, nothing had been reported on the news yet. He checked the news, which he had turned on after his mother left. Still nothing major. He checked the news for 2 reasons. 1, to see if there was a new hero fight he could watch and analyze. And 2, to see if there have been any major incidents that anyone he knew could have gotten involved in. He rarely felt dread, especially dread this strong. His gut was literally telling him something was wrong. But nothing had happened. He usually would listen to his gut, but nothing had happened. That meant it was wrong. For the first time his dread was wrong. Or was it? After another 30 minutes of checking the news, he calmed down. No major events had happened. While the feeling of dread was still there, it was no longer growing. His heart was largely calmed, and he figured it was just a false alarm. He was now laid down in his room, his eyes glued to the ceiling. Thinking. He was always thinking, of course. He did already have 6 books of analysis after all. If he didn't think, he wouldn't be himself. He raised his hand above himself, contemplating why the feeling of dread had appeared. Nothing had gone wrong. I could just be overthinking things. I do tend to do that. He did it all the time after all. We are live at the Qiashi Ward shopping mall where a villain was just apprehended for using his quirk to attack civilians. The villain is known as Kraken and is well known for his fight 7 years ago where he fought the late pro hero Dragon. Police are currently taking him to the station in which they will follow their protocol. The newscaster spoke. Currently the total number of casualties and injuries are unknown. Many areas of the mall have collapsed, burying civilians underneath. So far only 1 fatality has been counted, with 22 injuries. The dead civilian was seen trying to save other people around them. And without them at least 22 more would be dead alongside them. Izuku looked at the news in shock. He had gotten up to get some water, using a plastic cup in case he dropped it. He was certainly glad he did, or else there would be glass in his foot. All he could hope at the moment was that his mom wasn't counted among the dead. He continued watching the news, hope fading as the camera panned over the victims, many injured. No matter how hard he looked, he couldn't see his mom among the living. My gut feeling wasn't wrong after all, were his last thoughts before he tuned back into what the newscaster was saying. We have just received the news that the civilian spotted saving others before dying in a brave act of heroism has been identified as 36-year-old Midoriya and Co. His eyes went wide and he felt his heart stop. No, we give our condolences to the family and friends of this brave woman. Tears sprung to his eyes as he felt his breathing quicken. Why? Why do the people I care about die? Crying to the point of no emotion is what incurs the void of nothingness. Those who have encountered the void are likely to see the issues brought upon by the lack of a true black or white. White is not the void. Black is not the void. The true void is what people refuse to acknowledge in the middle. It is gray. It is neither happiness nor dread. It is both the pure and the tainted, mixed into one. It is numbness. It is without feeling, yet it is empty of apathy. It is blinding in every way. Later that night the police arrived, bringing Izuku to what would be his foster parents' house. The adults greeted him with smiles, but he just felt empty. His fosters introduced him to all the other foster kids. They all seemed to glare at him, especially after his regeneration quirk, named Restoration in the registry, was mentioned. He didn't bother smiling at them. He felt void of anything. He didn't know how to live now. The children had Izuku cornered in one of the shared bedrooms of the house. One of them had him pinned to the wall, their water quirks surrounding his arms and legs. He barely felt the punch hit his head. He also barely felt the feeling of his regeneration kicking in when a knife was thrown at it. When the beating finally stopped, when the kids realized he wouldn't react, he just sat in that corner. For an hour he didn't move. All he did was think. He was thinking of what to do. He knew for sure that he didn't want to stay in this house. To him it wasn't home. He sat and thought. He could leave. But to where? If I am caught I will just be brought back here. He reasoned. He weighed the options. Leaving meant either finding a place to stay or living on the streets. Staying meant getting beaten up daily. It meant being taunted with no savor. It meant death in every way but literal. And if they find out about how my mom died, they would just use it against me. That's when he made his decision. Both options were bad, but one less than the other. He was going to leave. He quickly packed what little he was allowed to keep and snuck out the window. He was going to live on the streets now. It was going to be rough. But he was strong, wasn't he? Age 9. Almost a full month had gone by since Izuku had joined the streets. He had thought of dyeing his hair to cover his identity, but he had ultimately decided against it. He most definitely wasn't the only green-haired child in the city. If he kept out of the limelight, he would be fine. Well, that was the idea anyways, Izuku thought while he was running from some older adult who had recognized him. The guy was obviously low on money, so they were likely trying to turn him in for the money reward. Yes, money award. Izuku had been reported missing almost immediately. This had actually shocked him a bit. Despite the foster parents' smiles, he had thought that they didn't actually want him there. They could just want to stay fit as parents. He turned a corner down an alleyway. He had expected it to go through to the other street, but it didn't. Instead, there was a wall, a brick wall. He may be scrawny and small, but he knew he could probably climb it. He may have only been on the streets a few weeks, but he had already picked up a few things. First off, don't trust the heroes. Many of them have a high civilian casualty count, and if they think you are a threat or someone around you is a threat, then they won't hesitate to fully unleash their quirk. Dying is not something I want. Second, thugs won't hesitate to rob a child, nor will they hesitate to attack a child with their quirk. If he were anyone else right now, he may have died of blood loss already. He let out an involuntary shudder as he ran towards the wall. Blood seeps through his clothes. It's too red, too red. Third, the world is not such a great place, nor is it always so black and white. Many heroes are actually very bad, while many villains just want to live normally. Life is not fair. Of course, those weren't the only things he had learned, but those were the ones most important right now. Well, except maybe his ability to escape places. He had already learned how to pick a lock, and how to throw himself off of objects with little injury. And up. He latched onto the ledge of the wall before vaulting over it, leaving the man behind. Or so he thought before he heard the footsteps start back up behind him. He quickly looked back, and yup, same guy. Izuku decided that it wasn't worth being chased around the city, so instead he decided he would do something that the man probably couldn't do. Climb a building. Granted, he had only practiced a few times, and those times ended with Izuku having scrapes and bruises, but for the most part he did alright. He turned down another alleyway, this time one he had already gone through on multiple occasions. It had a large set of emergency exit stairs. Convenient. He rapidly began climbing the sides of the stairs. Running up the stairs would take too long and made it to the roof. He looked down and saw the guy looking flabbergasted, not even bothering climbing the stairs. Izuku turned away, already knowing that the guy had given up on him. I'll have to run across a few rooftops before I get far enough away from here. After all, he will probably call the cops. After running over a few of the buildings, not exactly unscathed, he nearly fell off a building a few streets back. He sat down, feeling satisfied with how far he had run. He flinched when the noise of sirens suddenly rushed by. So close. I think that might have been because of him. If I weren't the one he was chasing, I would feel happy that he felt the need to call the cops after seeing a missing kid. A surprisingly low amount of people would do that. It's always, oh, I figured someone else would call the cops, or I wasn't sure it was the same kid. Damn it, 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 yelled after his team had finished scouring the area that the man, 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘, had seen the recently missing Midoriya Izuku, a 9-year-old child who just a month prior had lost his mother. He had been put on the case the moment the young Midoriya went missing. He usually wasn't put on missing children's cases, but for this one he was. For good reason too. Midoriya's mother has just been killed by Kraken, the same villain that was notorious for going after the families of his victims. Of course, Kraken was currently in custody, but that didn't mean his followers were. Kraken had an almost cult-like following, and because of this, whenever he did something and got caught, his followers would continue with what he would have done, which was usually going after his victims' families. 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘𝗧𝗔 though now, because of the kid being spotted on the streets. It was more like that this was a runaway case, but that didn't mean this kid was in any less of danger. 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 could already feel a headache coming on. Izuku sat alone on his birthday this year for the first time ever in his life. Age 10, Izuku, now having been in the streets for 6 months, was getting the hang of things. Sorta. He still had only been recognized that one time, but he had been having a hard time getting food, as expected when you live on the streets. Of course, he could always go dumpster diving for food, but he would rather not do that more than twice a week. He didn't want to eat garbage. No one ever would, except maybe mice. Would Nezu? He cut off that thought. His face showed a look that was a mix of horror and amusement. I never want that image in my head again. Just a few hours later, Izuku found himself in front of a library. He had been thinking to himself, what if I get behind in school? And ended up deciding that he could just learn from the library's textbooks. He was currently sitting in a corner surrounded by books, a stack on his left holding all the books he had already read through today, and a stack on the right holding the ones he needed to read. Currently, he is reading a book on the English language. He already hated it. Why are there so many rules and exceptions in this language? He screamed within the safe confines of his mind. He didn't understand why the I before E except after C rule existed if the word neighbor ignores the rule entirely. It's such a stupid fucking language. He practically screeched into his mind. Yes, the usually precious bean was swearing, albeit, in his mind, he felt like tossing this English book. But alas, he couldn't. So instead, he opted to put the book away and look at something different, like math, something with a set of logical rules, something easy. He grabbed a math textbook from the stack of unread books. This textbook was specifically for his year, so he wouldn't be ahead. Though he planned to learn something harder at some point, he decided it was best to only learn what he needed to know for this school year. After all, he shouldn't be in public spaces for long. He could still be recognized, so limiting the time he was in public spaces was for the best. In a year it should be fine to stay here and learn everything at my pace. I won't be as easily recognized by then. Hopefully. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 was currently rushing to his car, Sansa close behind him. They had just received a call that the missing child from 6 months ago had been respotted leaving a library of all places. Most kids his age don't even try to read. The moment he arrived on scene with his officers, he sent everyone to search the area. He wouldn't let a 10-year-old child stay on the streets. The only reason he knew the kid was still on the streets is because when the girl who had phoned in the sighting called, she had mentioned that he looked skinnier than any kid should. After sending his men in, he went to talk to a few of the library staff and civilians that had been in the area. Maybe they could give him clues on the direction the kid had gone after he left. Maybe they even knew what he had been reading. He walked up to the library owner. They were rather young, with bright yellow glasses and black hair. "Did you see a young child, 10 years old, with green hair in here about an hour ago?" he asked them. They obviously seemed nervous talking to the police. But that's none of his concern right now. Why, yes, he was sat over in that. They pointed to a corner at the back of the library. Corner, he seemed to be reading school textbooks, considering their size, though I never got close enough to see what exactly he was reading. True, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 nodded. Did he seem malnourished or small for his age? He already knew the answer, considering what that one girl had said, but he wanted more of a confirmation. Yeah, if you hadn't said he was 10, I would have guessed he was 7 or 8. True, damn it. He breathed deeply before asking another question. Did you see which direction he left in? No, I left my post out front for a minute or so, but when I returned he was gone. All his books returned. True, they responded. Okay, this is my last question, then I will get out of your hair. He paused for a moment before continuing. Did anyone speak with him? No, but he got uncomfortable when anyone would get within 10 feet of him. True, fuck. Either he is getting uncomfortable because he doesn't want to be recognized, or he has been bullied, abused before. It's probably a mix of both, not wanting to be recognized and bullying. If Bakugo Mitsuki's and Bakugo Katsuki's testimonies when Midoriya disappeared are anything to go by. Shortly after he had left the library, Izuku heard sirens. Was I recognized? He freaked out and bolted, running far from the library, far from the area he usually stayed around. Do not fly too close to the sun, young Icarus. You are but just a fledgling. A candle before it becomes a phoenix. Age 10, do not stray too close. Izuku was in an alleyway sitting next to a large garbage dumpster. It had only been a day since he had run from the library, and after he had stopped running he ended up passing out here. Damn body, making me pass out after running a few kilometers. His thoughts were cut off when he heard a small noise from just a few meters away. What was that? He asked himself before the noise sounded again. Izuku cautiously made his way over to where the sound was coming from. He relaxed a bit when he saw what was making the noise. It's not something deadly. A small brown tabby kitten was mewing at him. No mother was in sight. The kitten, who looked very skinny, was likely either abandoned by their mother or their mother was gone. Izuku slowly went over to the kitten, who seemed slightly frightened by him, and bent down, reaching his hand out. The kitten cautiously sniffed it, checking it for danger. After sniffing his hand, the kitten wandered closer after realizing he wasn't a threat. When the kitten let him pet them, Izuku cried. He cried a lot. That was how Izuku ended up with a tiny male kitten named Taiko. The calm before the storm is one of the most deafening things to the ones with a mind filled with sorrow. Just hours after he practically adopted Taiko, Izuku had gone to get him some food. Taiko looked very unfed, as if you aren't. So he was going, with what little money he had from stuff people dropped, to go buy some kitten food, and probably some snack bars for himself. They were much healthier than trash can food, and can be bought for relatively cheap. He had left Taiko back with his stuff and his blanket, which were behind the dumpster. That way he didn't have to bring Taiko out into a place filled with humans. He walked into a small grocery store, one less in the open, and looked for some kitten food. After finding something that looked like it would work, he grabbed it before heading to get some snack bars. The kitten food he grabbed was the hard food kind. Taiko seemed old enough to be able to eat it, and it was easier to buy in large portions. With items in hand, Izuku walked to the counter and paid for them, leaving him with just a small amount of change left over. The store clerk gave a sort of sorry smile, or that's what it looked like to Izuku. He couldn't understand what exactly the guy meant with the smile, but he just smiled back. While walking back the alleyway where Taiko was, something grabbed his head, covering his mouth. He freaked out, immediately dropping the stuff he just bought and bringing his hands up to try to pry the hands off. Come quietly, kid. I'm not here to hurt you, just bring you to the boss. He let out an involuntary scream as his hands tried and failed to get the hands off. The world can be cruel. Sometimes the best people end up in the worst positions. Sometimes the worst people end up in the best positions. A young scarred teenager was walking along the sidewalk of the worst parts of town. He froze for a second when he heard a scream, but he almost continued while thinking, "It's none of my business. This is the worst part of town. We hear screams like that all the time." The teen almost ignored the situation entirely. That was until he laid eyes on the kid in danger. Without truly thinking, he ran towards them and rammed into the adult that was grabbing onto the child. Ramming into the guy hurt like a motherfucker, but it got the job done. The adult was now sprawled out a few meters away while the kid was crouched down in fear. "Hey kid, you all right?" the teen asked as he crouched down in front of the kid. The kid looked up shakily before nodding. He looked back over at the guy he had rammed into, but the guy was gone. "Strange. Why did you save me?" the kid said with a wobbly voice. "Why, kid, someone your age should not have to go through kidnapping," he answered with a half-truth. Truthfully, he had run without thinking. He was also partially reminded of himself. While the situation was very different from what his had been, he didn't want the kid to end up like him. The teen noticed the fallen kitten food. "Got a kitten?" The kid nodded and picked up all of the dropped items before speaking really quickly. "Thanks for saving me, but I gotta now. Bye," and then promptly running away. Surprised the kid didn't run as soon as he saw my scars. "He's a good kid. Hope he gets home safe." He did not take close enough look at the kid to realize that he probably did not have a home to return to. Izuku quickly ran back to the alleyway where his stuff and Taiko were. Taiko mewed up at him as soon as he was visible to the kitten. He went over and sat by the small kitten before opening the bag of kitten food. Once the bag was open, he grabbed some of the food and placed it on the ground in front of Taiko. Taiko sniffed the food before taking a hesitant bite. Once deemed that it not only tasted good, but that it also wasn't bad for him, Taiko greedily ate as much as his small stomach could handle, which wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him alive. Izuku broke open one of his own snack bars and ate it. It tasted rather bland, but he didn't mind. Bland foods have a way better taste than the dumpster food he had been eating the past 6 months, though that's not a surprise. Half the food he has ever found in the dumpster are either mixed together so much that the individual meals can't be discerned, or be moldy. Very moldy. Obviously, he shouldn't be picky with what he eats now that he is on the streets, but he does make sure he doesn't eat anything that could poison him, like moldy food. That shit was bad. He lifted his hand and scratched behind Taiko's ear while he ate. Taiko let out a small purr at Izuku petting. Izuku sighed. He should head back to the safer part of town. It may only be slightly safer, but at least I know where I am while I am there. "Boss, I failed to catch him today. I was interrupted." "That's okay. We don't need him yet. We will leave him alone for now. I have no doubt that he will be more fruitful if we leave him alone for now," the man sighed. "Return to your post for now." "Yes, sir." Izuku spent a cold Christmas without his family this year. All he had now was what he could carry and a quickly growing 4-month-old Taiko, with a now teenager Taiko, who had grown quite a bit since he was found. Izuku found himself having to dumpster dive more than his allotted twice a week. While it wasn't his favorite thing to do, he was glad that he was able to help Taiko grow. Izuku himself hadn't grown much, which, considering how little he is able to eat, makes sense. Since it had been 3 months since he had last gone to the library, he figured it would be fine to go back, so he left Taiko on a roof with his stuff. Walking into the same library, like a dumbass, he went and found some textbooks again, including the dreadful English one. He was completely unaware of the stare the owner was giving him. He sat down in the same corner and began reading the books, starting with a math book, or multiple. After a few hours, he had already gotten the concepts that were being taught to people well above his grade level. "Screw my original plan. I quite prefer learning what I want." The owner of the library had no clue what to do. Should I notify the police that he is back here again? Or should I let him read and call it in after he leaves? They fiddled with the hem of their shirt before coming to a decision. I should call them now. He's a child on the streets. Wherever they take him should allow him to read and learn as he pleases. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 was quite happy when he was notified that the Midoriya boy had been once again spotted at the library. He must really like learning. Midoriya being spotted meant that he had in fact survived winter. He had been worried for the kid when he had gone without any sightings during the past few months. He and his team rushed to the library just in time to see the small boy making a run for it, probably having heard the sirens closing in. Midoriya obviously didn't want to be caught, despite all the benefits going into foster care would have for him. Though, because of his escapade and his avoidance of police, he would likely be placed under a pro-hero instead of a civilian due to the flight risk Midoriya would present once caught. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 quickly exited his cruiser and chased after the kid. "I'm so close. Kid," he yelled out while running after the kid. "Midoriya, we only want to keep you safe." "I don't believe you." "True," the kid yelled back. "Ouch, okay." He had expected Midoriya to not trust him, or any of the police considering he was running from them, but it still hurt having the kid actually say it. Midoriya ran into a nearby alleyway. "Isn't this the one where Midoriya? Oh shit. He's going to climb up the building. How the fuck does this kid know how to climb buildings so fucking well?" 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 ran after Midoriya into the alleyway, and he could already see the kid scaling the emergency stairs. Damn it. He started running up the stairs as fast as his tired legs could go. He couldn't scale the sides of the stairs like the kid could, but he could run up them. Once he reached the top, he saw Midoriya on the next rooftop over. He ran over but couldn't jump to the next rooftop. Midoriya, we only want to help you. Living on the streets is not healthy for you. As he said that, he noticed just how skinny the kid currently was. He is so underweight. Midoriya turned around. I know that, but it's better than being in foster care. True, just what does this kid think foster care is like? Whatever he thinks, he truly believes it. Maybe something happened at his foster home, but he had only been there for a few hours. Midoriya whirled back around and continued jumping from building to building until 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 could no longer see him. Izuku made his way back to Taiko. Taiko looked up at him and meowed before pawing at his legs. I'm okay, Taiko. I just had a run-in with the police who want to bring me into the foster care system. Taiko meowed back before rubbing his head against Izuku's legs. Izuku smiled before picking up Taiko and petting him. Age 10, after library incident 2.0, Izuku came to the sad conclusion that he can't go to that library to learn anymore. Of course, that didn't mean he had to avoid all libraries, but it still upset him. This library was closest to where he typically slept at night, which was currently atop a roof where few are likely to find him. Over the few months since the second library incident, it was now a year after he ran, he tried out going to different libraries. So far he had been recognized in all but one. Why am I being recognized? You would think they would have forgotten about me and my face long ago. He was genuinely surprised when the same detective showed up every time. Wouldn't he have dropped the case, or given it to someone else? Izuku was currently sitting atop the roof of the one library he had yet to be recognized at. Taiko sat next to him. This library had less books than the other ones, but at least it had most of the textbooks. Currently he was reading stuff a year above what he should be at. Everything he was learning was fun. Well, except English. His favorite subject was still math. Everything about it was fun. Rule-filled subjects are learned easier by those who don't follow the rules. Ironic. He sighed. It was probably time for him to go grab some actual food from a grocery store. He had some money that he found on the ground. It was honestly surprising how much money people drop. It was enough for him to get a few food items, so that he didn't have to eat from the dumpsters. Despite a year having passed since he ran, he had only grown a few centimeters at maximum. Though he understood why, he hadn't been eating much after all. He stood up to grab the money he had collected from his backpack. His backpack was now old, and probably wouldn't be carrying things for much longer. I could probably go to that trashed beach. I may be able to find a thrown-out backpack there. He shook the thought away. Taiko looked up at him and meowed. Taiko had grown quite a bit, and was practically an adult cat now. I'm just heading to the store, Taiko, no need to worry. Taiko moved his head in what looked like a nod before curling up into a loaf. Izuku smiled at the cat before petting his head. I'll be back soon. Taiko let out a small meow that sounded full of sass, almost like he was saying, you better be back soon. Izuku chuckled before walking to the edge of the roof and climbing down the wall. Recently he had learned how to climb both up and down walls efficiently. Now he could escape easier, without having to use as much energy. Not like he had much anyways. At the store, Izuku was able to pick up something more than the usual snack bars. He had managed to buy a few bananas as well. Izuku ended up walking out of the store with a few bananas, 2 snack bars, and some adult cat food for Taiko. All in all, a good trip for him, better than most trips. Sometimes he couldn't get Taiko cat food, and would end up having to give him some of the dry snack bars and dumpster food. He always felt bad when he had to give him the gross dumpster food. Age 11. Once again it was Izuku's birthday. The only reason he even knew that was because he still had his phone, which he charged in internet cafes whenever he got the chance. He didn't check it all that often anymore, only really using it for navigation and to keep track of the time and date. Izuku wasn't alone this year. Unlike last year, he now had Taiko, who rubbed against him as he cried over all the memories he had from when he was younger, from when he had 2 parents and from when he had one. On his birthday, he decided to treat himself to a pastry from a local cafe. He had looked in awe at all the pastries and sweets when he entered. He hadn't had anything sweet in over a year. After 10 minutes at the cafe, he had finally decided what he wanted. He went up to the clerk with a smile and ordered dango. He left like a prancing deer. And like a prancing deer, he was unaware of the stares he received. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 had gone out to lunch with his friend Toshinori. They did this every Saturday. Sometimes, like this time, they would just sit quietly, enjoying each other's company. He had been looking at a newspaper, specifically the Musutofu paper. Most of the stuff he was reading in the newspaper was stuff he already knew, but he read it to see the public's opinion on events. He didn't know why, but something was compelling to look up from his paper, not up at Toshinori, but up at the other people within the cafe. He picked up his coffee and started drinking from it before lifting his gaze. His gaze scoured the cafe before reaching the small kid that he had tried to catch on multiple occasions. He nearly spit out his coffee. Nearly. Toshinori seemed to have noticed the look on his face. You look like you swallowed a bug. Naomasa, true, the man chuckled, before turning to look at what Tsukachi was looking at. Why are you staring at that kid? Tsukachi shook out of his reverie. That he hissed quietly as Midoriya began walking out with some dango. Is a kid that I have been trying to catch for over a year now. His friend began coughing. What? He has been on the run ever since he ran from his foster home just over a year ago. He spoke before adding, sorry Toshinori, but I am going to have to cut this lunch short. Toshinori nodded, understanding why Tsukachi needed to go. Tsukachi grabbed his phone and stood up to follow the kid. He quickly unlocked his phone and went to call Sansa. Detective Tsukachi, what are you calling for? Sansa asked once he picked up the call. I'm currently tailing the kid Midoriya. Sansa interrupted him. Yes, Midoriya. I am currently tailing him. I was sitting with Toshinori for lunch when I noticed that Midoriya was in the cafe as well. He ordered some dango and left. He replied, tell me your location and I will bring the whole squad. I'm at. Izuku suddenly got the feeling of being watched, just as he finished his dango. He looked back and saw the detective following him. He seemed to be on the phone, likely calling his fellow police. Izuku quickly turned back around and started running. I have really bad luck. It's my birthday, for goodness sake. The detective noticed and started downright running after him. Midoriya, it would make things so much easier if you just allow us to bring you in. The detective yelled out. I am not allowing myself to go to any foster home. True, Midoriya had yelled back at Tsukachi. Why not? You'll be a lot safer. You won't have to live off the street. He called out. Yeah, safer, sure, use that word. The kid snarked. The fosters you put me in before weren't safe. True, what? What? They had a full background check done on them. What does he mean by not safe? What do you mean by that, kid? He asked, slowly getting out of breath. Damn, this kid was fast. I don't have to answer that question. False. Tsukachi flinched involuntarily at the shock that jolted through his back. So the kid believed that he did have to answer, but didn't want to. Why though? Sorry, detective, but I just can't let myself get caught and put back in the system. Midoriya called out again before dashing into an alleyway. Damn, this is how the kid always escaped. The second he reached the alleyway, the kid was already gone. Sirens came around the block and stopped. All officers came out of their cruisers, searched the area. He only just now got out of reach. Tsukachi yelled out. The police would not find Izuku that day, just like how they had not been able to for the past 14 months. Izuku's heart was pounding as he climbed up the wall. Once he climbed to the top, he didn't stop running. He leapt across multiple buildings before reaching Taiko. His legs were aching and he couldn't help but feel like collapsing. He fell down, letting Taiko greet him. Taiko, he panted out, I had another run-in with the detective. He seems really hellbent on bringing me into foster care. Taiko meowed before rubbing his head against Izuku. I'm fine, obviously, just a little tired. Another meow. Izuku chuckled before petting Taiko, letting the cat's purrs calm him down. Slowly, the adrenaline vanished. Kid, what are you doing in this alleyway? A voice called out, startling Izuku out of his thoughts. Ooh, thinking, Izuku said back before turning around. Standing at the end of the alleyway was a man wearing a mask, a large katana attached to his back. The guy also had his hair in a large ponytail. At the police department, Tsukachi was currently signing some papers that would let Eraserhead in on the Midoriya case. Maybe now we will be able to get him off the streets. Aizawa's fairly good at catching vigilantes. A regular kid should be a piece of cake for him. Fate isn't set in stone, but sometimes a person will follow the path chosen for them. And just as fate had intended, a young teen would meet someone that would change his future. Age 11, thinking pretty hard. You didn't even notice me here. If I were a villain, you'd be dead. The masked guy stated. His voice, dare he even think it sounded ominous. It was obvious this guy wasn't a hero. But he just stated he wasn't a hero. So what does that make him? A vigilante that's closer to the villain side. But your young brain doesn't know this. You don't even know what a vigilante is. Who are you? Damn his stutter. Kid, I wear a mask for a reason. I don't like my main identity being spread. Why? Though this identity has come to be known as 𝗧𝗘. 𝗧𝗘. Never heard that name. As if sensing that Izuku didn't know who he was, the 𝗔𝗧𝗘 spoke again. I carry out justice similar to heroes. But unlike heroes, I carry out justice against both heroes and villains alike. That made Izuku more confused and scared. What does that mean? He looked around to find any exits in the alleyway that he could use if need be. Kid, you really should stop muttering. I've been muttering, he thought in alarm. Yes, you've been muttering, 𝗧𝗘 replied, clear irritation in his form. He sighed. You really need to learn to stop that. You look like you live on the streets. Muttering while on the streets only puts you in danger. Anyways, that means I am a vigilante. Izuku didn't respond, but he clearly didn't know what it meant. It means, a deep sigh, that I am not someone within the confines of the law, but I am not on the side of villains. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 couldn't say he was with the heroes, because he wasn't. His beliefs were against modern-day heroes. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Isn't that just a villain with a ton of enemies? Legally, yes. Morally, no. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 paused with a thought. Why am I still talking to this child? Cause he obviously knows little of the streets. Because he interests you, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 and 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. He has a different feeling to him, unlike any person you've ever met. Aizawa walked into the police department. He had just been signed to a new case, though he hadn't been told what the case was about. In fact, he had only been told that he needed to capture someone. If I was put on the job, then that means it is someone who can easily escape the police. Aizawa cut off 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. I'm on duty, call me Eraserhead. He activated his quirk for a brief second. Oh, of course, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 replied. Eraserhead. Glad to see you could make it for the briefing of this case. Yeah, just get on with it. Okay. This case is going to be different from your normal cases. Aizawa raised one of his eyebrows, but didn't interrupt. We need help. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 continued. With capturing someone, I know. Yeah, but this won't be the same as other cases you have done. You've said that already, Aizawa muttered. I have to push my point at Eraserhead. This is not a normal case, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 retorted. The case is that of a runaway. You can't catch a kid on the run. How old is this kid? Aizawa pushed. He's 11. The police can't catch an 11-year-old child. Did you all skip training this year? Let me finish. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 glared. He may be 11, but he has been on the run for over a year and a half, and he is fast. Not to mention he can climb buildings like they are nothing. The kid can climb buildings. Interesting. So that's why you couldn't get him. All he had to do was climb a building and he was gone. Aizawa thought for a second. Just how fast is the kid? And how skittish? When I said fast, I meant fast. Despite how little he looks to be eating, he is fast. Too fast. I'm the only one on my team that has gotten within a few meters of him. He's not your average kid, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 replied while opening the case file, which he had grabbed off of a filing cabinet. He's fairly skittish. Does he have some form of speed quirk? Aizawa asked, curiosity spiking through him. Nope, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 shook his head. His quirk is registered as restoration. It's a healing, well, more accurately, a regeneration quirk. Aizawa hummed. So the kid is naturally fast, or, rather, has needed to learn to be that fast? Regeneration, you say? That's a pretty useful quirk to have. Yeah, it is a pretty useful quirk, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 agreed before continuing. Every time I have gotten close to him, or even tried talking to him, he has refuted, stating that it was better for him to stay on the streets, instead of going into the foster system. He also said that his previous fosters, which he had only had for half a day before he ran, weren't safe. He put up air quotes. Was he telling the truth when he said it? Aizawa asked, feeling inclined to agree with the kid. Yes, however we've done background checks, checked in on the house randomly, and even had people watch the house to see if they were safe. They were deemed fit. Were those tests before or after he ran? Aizawa asked, still inclined to believe the kid over the tests. He had seen what fosters could do without being punished. He had seen what had happened to Hitoshi. He knew that it could fly under the radar. The background checks were done before, while everything else was largely after. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 replied honestly. That's the problem. All that needs to be done the whole time any foster parent has a child under their watch, not just after the kid ran. Things could go under the radar. Aizawa stated in a lecturing tone. That is literally what happened with my son. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 shrinked beneath his glare. Why, you're right, he sighed. Of course I'm right, he snapped. After a few seconds he sighed. Make sure a new procedure is put in. This cannot keep happening. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 nodded before continuing after a few seconds. So the reason the kid, Midoriya Izuku, was put into foster care was because his mother had just been killed in a villain attack. You know that attack at Keiashi Mall last year by Kraken? She was the civilian that saved many of the victims. Aizawa nodded. He remembered that attack. He was one of the first responders. What's he look like? If I am going to be bringing him in, I need a description. Here, let me just give you a photo of when he was last spotted. He handed over a photo from the file. This was captured in the Kuro cafes 6 days ago. I was actually there for lunch and had spotted him. He got some dango for himself. It was also the kid's birthday. Aizawa grabbed the photo and examined it. It was slightly blurry, but it was a color photo of Midoriya. Midoriya had green hair that currently reached down to his shoulders. His eyes were also pretty green. Midoriya's family name suits him pretty well. One thing to note is that he loves to learn. Almost every time he has been spotted he was at a library, reading textbooks, most above his grade level. Also, after he ran, when we searched his family's home, we found a few notebooks that contained data on heroes. All of it was handwritten by him. Not all of his data was just stuff he could find on the internet. He wrote analysis on practically everything. Hair color. He would find the hex code of a color that matched best. Fighting style. He would write pages on that. He's obviously intelligent. Don't underestimate his ability to run. I would never underestimate his ability to run, especially since he is able to run from the police easily at the age of 11. Aizawa responded gruffly. He knew better than to underestimate the kid. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 nodded. I think that's all the info on him, but here's a copy of the case file so you can read more on him. There's also his analysis on a hero in there, so that you can see how he thinks, or at least how he thought. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 handed the whole file to Aizawa. Aizawa hummed as he grabbed the file. He stood up after grabbing it before leaving the station. He could read through it later. Right now was coffee time. After all, he had been woken up at an ungodly hour to come in. 10 in the morning on a Sunday is not ungodly. Izuku stared at the masked vigilante that he had now met a whole week previously. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 clearly wasn't going to let Izuku stay on the streets unprotected, considering he was now checking in on him nightly. He was genuinely confused as to why 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧 was checking in on him. He does not look, nor seem like the type to help kids. Checking on me again, he asked while petting Taiko, who was staring at 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧 warily. You're a kid on the streets. Yeah, and you totally seem like someone who would check in on a kid nightly, he retorted in a sarcastic tone. I'll ignore that comment. Anyways, I've been thinking this past week, do you want to be trained on how to protect yourself? I can teach both hand-to-hand and weapons. Izuku thought for a second before responding, sure. That night 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧 began teaching Izuku hand-to-hand combat, starting with the basics, before slowly escalating it over the next month. Izuku learned everything he was taught rather quickly, which surprised 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧. Something that would normally take days to learn Izuku would learn in an hour. It allowed Izuku to quickly excel in his training. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧 also started bringing food for Izuku, along with clean water bottles. The kid was skinny and underfed. If he didn't fix that, then he may accidentally overexert himself during training. Eraserhead never saw the kid for the first month of him being on the case. No one had. He was surprised, but he continued his daytime and nighttime patrols. His patrol route, having been altered to go near every library in Musutafu, ended up not seeing as many villains, though it did see him getting stopped by other heroes who didn't recognize him. It was getting rather annoying. Age 11. One does not simply have good luck. Fate's work never fails. Or does it? After the first month mark of Izuku's training, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 decided to start training him in knives and other weapons, but mainly knives. This was a bad idea on his part, because Izuku has no sense of aim. None. No sense of aim at all. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 was extremely lucky that the throwing knife missed him. If it hadn't, it may have hit him in the neck, head, or chest. All dangerous places for a knife to hit. Of course, Izuku had immediately started giving apologies about it, but 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 stopped him. It was a mistake, and he wanted to leave it at that. Though after that, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 started putting more care into teaching Izuku weapons, just so that he didn't accidentally get killed by the kid. Cause who really wants to be killed by a kid in an accident? Hell, who wants to see a kid accidentally kill someone for the first time? Some would kill to see that. About a week into the weapons training, Izuku had become better at throwing knives. He no longer missed the target all the time. He was finally starting to get the hang of it. Weapons are harder to learn than hand-to-hand combat. Currently, he was sitting atop a dumpster in an alleyway. He was rather bored, and apparently, so was Taiko, as he was currently trying his best to play around with a small insect. Izuku let out a sigh. Today the only safe library was closed, as it needed some maintenance done. It left Izuku with either a wandering the streets, looking for fallen yen, or be doing something else. Quite frankly, he doesn't want to look for fallen cash. Sure, it was useful, but that required being out in the open for extended periods of time, something he couldn't afford to do all the time. This left him having to look for something else to do. He sighed. There wasn't much a kid on the streets could do. Honestly, outside of training, most of his free time was spent either at the library, sleeping, or dumpster diving, with the occasional wandering the streets. He couldn't afford to do much outside of those things, or else he may be caught. I don't want to be caught, he thought as he twiddled his fingers. Suddenly he had an idea. He grabbed his backpack, not the same one from a month previous, but one he had picked up from Dagaba. He opened it and grabbed 2 items. Both items were knives, though not given to him by 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. The first one was a paring knife with Izuku engraved on it. The second one was a 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 knife. Both were still in their cases, and both were given to him by his father when he was 6, though he wasn't allowed to even touch them until long after his father had passed. However, now he could touch them. Literally no one could say otherwise. Well, except the police. It's not exactly legal to carry such a large paring knife around, nor is it legal to be carrying around my 16 centimeters 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏 knife, but that one is much closer to the limit than my paring knife. But it's also not exactly legal for me to be training with a vigilante. Izuku spun the smaller knife around by a string attached to its gripped end. Twirling it was much funner than doing nothing. He watched it spin and spin for a while before putting it in his pocket, placing the paring knife back in his backpack. Tycho meowed at him as knives were put away. I'm just putting my knives away, Tycho. 𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗘. I can't keep my knives out at all time. They are both over the legal limit. If I'm caught with them, then I'll be in bigger trouble, outside of just running. Tycho placed a paw against his leg before rubbing against it. You're such a weird cat, you know that. Tycho gave him a look that practically screamed, hypocrite. Izuku, who was caught off guard by the look, burst out laughing. On the third week of training with weapons, Izuku could say that he has completely learned how to throw knives. Now, obviously, when put into use outside of training, he is likely to fail, considering moving targets and stationary targets are completely different, but he was moving along nicely. Now 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘 was teaching him to add knives into hand-to-hand combat, allowing him to use a knife in a fight. He was enjoying learning from 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘, but he could clearly see something was off with his mentor during the third week. He would spend less time training him now, and more time off doing his vigilante work. Of course, Izuku didn't mind too much, but now instead of a specific time he and 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘 would meet up, he would have to wait for a text to come through his phone. It was kind of annoying, but he understood, or at least he thought he did. Izuku received a text on the 29th of September, one that changed his daily routine. My mask was crushed by a fellow vigilante who was getting in my way. Because of this, I am shedding this identity. Are you okay? I am fine, but I will no longer be able to train you. Oh, okay, I have some contacts for you who may be able to help you more while you are on the streets. They aren't exactly legal, but with your luck, you'll be fine. 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘 sent over a few phone numbers and addresses. Izuku didn't like the idea of associating with what were essentially criminals. 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘 was the only real exception. Thanks for the contacts. Stay safe under whatever new identity you choose. Oh, and thanks for all the training. No problem, kid. I also left something on our meeting roof for you. Thanks, and that was the final conversation Izuku had with 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘. To be honest, Izuku had gotten attached to the vigilante. Despite 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘's obvious dislike of most heroes, he could be quite kind in his words. Plus, the sandwiches that he would give him tasted amazing. He was most definitely going to miss 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘, but he also knew that it was for the best. Aizawa grumbled. He had assumed that he would find the kid within a week. After all, he could apprehend villains and vigilantes within the same time. But no, the kid had fallen off the map over the last 2 months. No one had seen him, not even once. It was frustrating to him. He had certainly expected to see the kid by now. This kid sure knows how to hide. Either that or no one knows what he looks like. The story hasn't been circulating through the media, so I should ask 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗧𝗏 to resurface the kid's face. May make it easier to get him. Aizawa shook his head. Now wasn't the time to think about the case. Currently he should be focusing on teaching his class. What was left of this class anyways? Though, they were all currently training in Gym Gamma. He wasn't technically teaching them, just leaving them to train their quirks. But he wouldn't be surprised if one of them accidentally got hurt. It happened all too often in this class. Though all those still in his class do have potential, so it could be worse. They could have no potential. Aizawa had to cut the class short by a whole 20 minutes. Apparently the kid had been reported for the first time in 2 months. Izuku was running with everything he's got. Of course he had to be spotted in the only safe library. Of fucking course. Currently he had the cat-headed officer right on his tail. Get it? Tail? Cause the officer is a walking anthropomorphic cat. Anyways, this officer obviously had more stamina and speed than the detective. They had been running for a solid 10 blocks now. If it weren't for 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘's training, he would probably have dropped at the 8th block. Though the training wasn't going to keep him going for much longer, he felt like he had been running for hours. Everything ached. Izuku ran into one of the alleyways that he had come to know from his many ventures into dumpster diving, and jumped atop the dumpster so that he could easily clamber to the rooftops. Maybe there, the feline officer would stop chasing him. As soon as he reached the rooftops, there was a figure there waiting for him. It took him a second to recognize the figure, but the second he did, he freaked out and he rushed out of the way of the figure's capture weapon and running along the building. He braced as he jumped between the rooftops. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. His brain screamed at him. He knew about Eraserhead from the few fights that had been videoed and put on the internet. Of course, those videos had been deleted within minutes. But Izuku had his ways. Kid, get back here. The gruff voice of Eraserhead called from behind him. No, Izuku barely managed to yell out. He was exhausted. He knew it was only a matter of time before he eventually got caught. This'll be so much easier on both of us if you just come with us. Eraserhead was close behind him. I am not giving up on running, Eraserhead. Oops, if he gets caught now he won't just be interrogated for running. Yeah, sometimes his brain picks the worst times to not think things through. How the hell do you know my name? Eraserhead asked while shooting his scarf forward. The capture weapon grabbed the kid's abdomen, stopping him from running. Izuku felt like shrinking under the man's crimson gaze. Izuku stuttered out, the internet, sir. The honorific slipped out on accident. Eraserhead just raised any eyebrow before letting the kid stand on his feet instead of dangling him in the air. Big mistake. Izuku, using the knife that he had kept on him from earlier, ripped through the scarf and ran. He could hear Eraserhead let out a stream of curses from behind him before the steps of the man picked up again. Obviously, Eraserhead had underestimated the 11-year-old child. Never underestimate a cornered beast. They are the most dangerous of creatures. Izuku ran like his life depended on it, which technically it did. He just didn't have a chance of dying from the police. But he did have that danger if he were to be put in foster care. Kid, why the hell do you have a knife? Eraserhead yelled out, obviously alarmed at an 11-year-old having a knife. Izuku didn't answer the question, instead choosing to focus on running. Before Izuku even realized it, he was reaching a large intersection, one where he couldn't run across the roofs. Izuku reached the edge of the last roof and froze, Eraserhead taking the chance to corner the kid. Give up, kid. No, I won't. Izuku stuttered out. Suddenly he felt a weight on his shoulder, and as soon as the weight appeared it jumped down. Taiko. How in the hell did Taiko get here? It's like he teleported. That is, in fact, what he did. Taiko hissed at Eraserhead. His ears were forced back and he was baring his teeth at the hero. Eraserhead raised an eyebrow before rushing forward. As soon as the hero rushed forward, a pressure came out of nowhere and Taiko continued hissing. Taiko was protecting his brother. Eraserhead froze. All his senses went on high alert as he looked at the cat. There was no way the cat could be doing this. Right, wrong, it was totally Taiko, and Taiko was pissed. The pressure strengthened, keeping Eraserhead in place. Izuku took the chance and bolted with Taiko. Izuku collapsed in the alleyway. Taiko had just saved him. He looked over at the brown cat. What was that? Taiko meowed. Right, asking a question to someone who can't answer verbally won't work. That was awesome. You saved me. Was that a quirk? Do you have a quirk? Can you teleport? What was that pressure you emitted? That was cool. Taiko deadpanned before meowing again. Right, one at a time, and only yes or no questions. That day Izuku simultaneously escaped Eraserhead and found out that Taiko had a quirk. Taiko's quirk analysis written by Midoriya Izuku on his phone's notepad. Taiko seems to have a multifaceted quirk. I am not sure if I saw all of it, but what I did see was so cool. Teleportation used to teleport between places. Pressure can emit a pressure that can freeze a target in place. Possible intelligence quirk possibly more. Age 11. Aizawa watched as the kid made it away while he couldn't move at all. It was frustrating, but at least he has more info on the kid. First, Midoriya seems to have a stutter. Whether that is a recent development or something he has had his whole life is unclear. Second, the kid has a knife, and not only that, the knife seems to be over the legal limit in terms of size. Not to mention the fact that the kid, while wobbly, knew how to carry it. Third, Midoriya knew who he was. That was shocking. Very few pros knew who he was, and yet this 11-year-old kid knew his name. The kid had stated he had found out who he was through the internet, which is definitely possible but unlikely. There were very few blog posts about him, and all the videos on him had been taken down. And finally, this kid had a cat with a quirk that can do multiple things. One of those things is fucking teleportation, and the other is some sort of pressure paralysis quirk. Both highly useful abilities. He also wouldn't be surprised if that cat had some sort of sensory abilities, considering the cat had just come out of nowhere while Midoriya was about to get caught. Admittedly, if Aizawa hadn't been so caught off guard, he could have just erased the cat's quirk. After all, that's what he does all the time. But he had been so caught off guard that both the cat and Midoriya slipped away. Now I have to go to 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘 and explain that I failed. Just as he thought that the sirens finally caught up to him, he jumped down from the building to talk to 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗧𝗏. How did he escape from you? 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏 asked as he walked up. First off, he had a knife. He showed the ripped apart capture weapon and used it to cut through my capture weapon. 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏's eye comically bulged at that. He had a knife. Yep, it looked like a Wharncliffe, just over the legal limit in terms of size, Aizawa responded. Though it's best for me to explain it in total somewhere else, because that is not all. What? You know what? You're right. Let's head back to the station. There you can explain everything that happened. Aizawa nodded. Once at the station, Aizawa and 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏 sat down at a table and Aizawa began explaining everything after Midoriya made it onto the roof. After Sansa chased him into the alleyway, he climbed up to the roof. Where I was, he looked shocked. At the time I thought it was because he wasn't expecting someone there, before dodging my capture weapon and running along the rooftops. I told you he was fast. If we didn't know better we would say he had some form of speed quirk. He's just so fast. 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗏 spoke up. Yeah, you weren't kidding. I called out to him, telling him to come back, and he yelled out no. It was clear that he was starting to slow down. Aizawa paused to take a sip of coffee, which he had in a thermos so that he could carry it while on the job. I then told him it would be easier on both of us if he just came with us. What he said next was surprising. What exactly did he say? The detective asked. He stated, and I quote, I am not giving up on running, Eraserhead. He knew your hero name. How the hell did he know that? 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 interrupted. Clear shock shone throughout his face. I'm getting to that. I then asked how he knew my name as I captured him with my capture weapon. He replied with, the internet, sir, all the while stuttering. Aizawa shifted in his seat. The thing is, there's very little about me on the internet, and all videos are taken down within minutes. That's worrying, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 stated after taking a brief second to let it sink in. Yeah, it is, he replied before continuing with his recounting of what happened. I then let him stand on his feet, because it's cruel to just let him dangle. That was a mistake on my part as he tore through the capture with the knife. He looked panicked as he did so, probably from being caught. Aizawa nodded. After that I ended up having to chase him until I reached that intersection and cornered him. You had him cornered. How did he escape? Yeah, I had him cornered. But almost as soon as he was cornered, a brown tabby cat appeared on his shoulder, likely through teleportation, before jumping down. A cat that can teleport. A nod. Honestly, I've never seen a cat more pissed before, but the cat was hissing a lot. Obviously, that isn't enough to chase me off. However, something even more unexpected happened. Something even more unexpected. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 piped up as he came into the room. He had been outside the door, but had decided to actually come in for the last bit. Aizawa looked over at 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 before nodding. Yeah, the cat suddenly let out a pressure that seems to be able to paralyze those it targets. Midoriya seemed just as shocked as I was. I admittedly was so shocked that I didn't activate my quirk. I accidentally ended up letting them move out of my gaze, effectively making me unable to use my quirk at all. They then ran off, shortly after you arrived on scene. A quirk that can both teleport and paralyze others, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 asked. So a multifaceted quirk. Those are rare, especially within animals. Yeah, Izuku had an idea. Was it stupid? Probably. Izuku, shortly after being chased by Eraserhead, had gone to the rooftop where 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 had left him something. He had quickly found what his mentor had left, a scythe. Yes, a freaking scythe. He hadn't been trained too well in one. He only had a day of training with one and 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 had limited knowledge, but he had shown quite a bit of interest in them. That was probably why he had been gifted it, because he had an interest in them. Scythes aren't too practical in close-range combat. Rather, they were useful against people with shields, and were also good for slashing and other such movements. While they are more commonly used in agriculture now, they are still considered weapons, which is why it's not technically legal to own one without a permit. Izuku treasures the scythe, but finds it sort of hard to hide. After all, standing from its pole it stood up to his shoulders. It wasn't small by any means. Currently he just had it hidden in a crevice behind a dumpster, where it was unlikely to be found. Just an hour earlier he had also gone through the list of contacts that 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 had left to him. A few of them seemed like they would be useful for when he puts his plan into motion. His plan? Well, to be a vigilante like his mentor, of course. Though he planned to be a slightly different type of vigilante. He wasn't planning on killing at all, unlike his mentor who had told him that he had to kill on multiple occasions. Izuku didn't care what situation he was in. He didn't want to kill people, even if they were criminals or villains. As a vigilante he hoped to start with taking down petty thieves and robbers, along with other unsavory people who could be taken down easier. This would allow him to slowly work his way up to taking down bigger people. Of course, he didn't expect it to be easy. Not one bit. He knew it wasn't going to be easy at all, but he also now had contacts that he could use. Naturally though, he wouldn't be able to use most of the contacts yet. He needs cash after all. Though he was in some luck when it came to some of the contacts. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 had technically given him 2 lists of contacts. One list he wouldn't be able to use just yet. But the other, all the people on this list had favors for 𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗏. And if Izuku used the correct password for those people then he would be able to use one. He was able to use the password for each person on that list once, so he would have to be decisive. After he uses those up he will start to have to earn cash through his contacts, or from just stealing cash from drug dealers. Both work. After a week of thinking he finally went to a few of the contacts. By week 2, he had what he asked for from them. He gained some steel-toed boots, a large hoodie with a personal mask and some rope, and a thin but durable bodysuit that covers from his neck down. This was all he would cash in at the moment. After all, it was all he would need to start with. He already had some weapons for defense. Currently Izuku was wearing his temporary gear atop a building with Taiko sitting next to him. He would eventually go to Dagaba Beach to see what can be scrapped there, which is a lot, but for now he would use the gear he has. Taiko meowed at him before putting a paw on Izuku's leg as if saying, "Stay safe." He nodded at Taiko. "I'll stay safe. I'm just gonna patrol a bit. I don't think too much will happen, but you stay here, 'kay?" A meow is all he got in return. Sighing, he stood up and walked to the edge of the building. Tonight was the night he would start anew, as a vigilante. Age 11. Through fire is where you truly go to experience the trials of life. Ex-pro hero Dragon. It had been a week since Izuku's first outing as a vigilante. Currently he hadn't been given a name yet, but people, criminals specifically, had screamed, "It's the Grim Reaper," at him. Yes, he was largely dressed in black and had a scythe attached to his back. But that did not mean he was the living incarnation of death. He could only hope that the name didn't stick, cause he didn't want it to end up being what he was called. He had run into only a few criminals during that week, but he had already learned a lot. Some criminals have a ridiculous amount of cash on them. Of course, after tying up the villains, he would take some of it. After all, he needed to live. And the dumpster food, with the little bit of food he could occasionally buy, just wasn't going to cut it anymore. Now, he could start buying more food for himself, though most of the food that he bought were snack bars or trail mixes. Eating from dumpsters was not a need anymore, which is great. Currently, he was sitting atop a criminal that had a girl cornered. For no good reason, of course. The guy was really drunk, so it had made it rather easy to take him down. So easy that a simple left hook knocked him out. Thank you, the soft voice of the girl said. Izuku still wasn't used to the gratitude people gave him when he saved them. It was honestly weird to him. No PR problem, miss. He stood up. He's tied up now. Could you, call the police for me? Why, yes, of course, the girl replied, calming down a bit before shakily grabbing her phone out of her purse to call 110. Author's note. 110 is the number for police in Japan, while 119 is for emergency services, typically for both ambulances or fire services. Okay, I have to go now, but you wait for the police, okay? That way he can be convicted for what he was trying to do. The girl nodded, a small smile on her face as the call finally went through. With one final nod, Izuku climbed up to the roof of a nearby building. Izuku walked along the rooftops back to Taiko. It was rather late now, almost 2 in the morning, and he needed sleep. He jumped at the sound of the sirens that rushed past him but continued walking. Once he reached Taiko, he took off his scythe and laid it down, before continuing to switch into his regular clothes. Taiko meowed at him before settling on his lap and purring. Izuku smiled at him and petted him before eventually drifting off into dreamland. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 and his team rushed to the scene, where a young girl had called in an incident. Apparently someone had taken down a criminal who was trying to do some not-so-savory things. When he arrived, he noted the tied-up, obviously drunk, guy. He also noted how shaky the girl, Suzuki Amiko, was, who was still holding her phone. Hey miss, could you tell me what happened here? He asked calmly. He needed to know the story from her, so that he may make a proper report. Suzuki nodded before recounting the tale. She had been going home from a late shift from her job and had been cornered by the drunk man. She had shrieked, and shortly after shrieking, someone had jumped down from the rooftops and punched the guy, who was knocked out immediately. She also mentioned how her savior had asked her to call the police before climbing up the building and disappearing. Apparently her savior had also been a bit cheerful when she thanked him. Did you get a good look at your savior? He asked her. He needed a description because this obviously wasn't the work of a hero. Suzuki nodded hesitantly before nodding. He had a giant scythe attached to his back. He also had a giant jacket and a mask. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 nodded. It seemed to be the work of the same person who had been taking down criminals within the past week. Did he give you a name? And no, okay. That's all the questions I have. Do you want an escort home? She shook her head. Okay then, stay safe. We'll contact you for your official testimony at a later date. Suzuki nodded before ambling her way home, which was fortunately only a few blocks away. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 made it back to the station and slumped his head on his desk. Seems like there is a new vigilante, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗧 stated tiredly. Yep, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗃 popped the P. At least he doesn't seem like the anarchist type. Yet, so far he's only been taking down minor criminals and has been rather kind to the victims. Yeah, but he's only been active for roughly a week. Though during that week he has been rather effective, taking down at least a criminal a night. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗃 commented. He also hasn't been reported to have received any injuries, and has shown no sign of visual quirk, though we'll learn more as we go. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗃 sighed. I'm going to have so much paperwork because of him, especially if we don't catch him soon. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗃 chuckled before patting 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗃 on the head. You won't be the only one with more paperwork. The detective just grumbled before lifting his head. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗃 smiled. Though the paperwork can wait till tomorrow. It's 2:30 in the morning, you need sleep to function. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗃 heard the detective say something along the lines of I only need coffee to function, and chuckled again. You're starting to sound like Aizawa. A patrolling hero suddenly sneezed while running across the rooftops. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗃 sighed. Fine, I'll get home and sleep. 2 days later. Come on boys, let's teach this guy a lesson. The leader of a small gang of 4 called out from the ground. He should learn not to mess with the Spike gang. Currently, Izuku was on top of the roof watching the gang surround a guy who was clearly nervous and scared. The only reason the gang had even surrounded the poor guy was because he had run into them while jogging. Izuku stealthily jumped down from the building. If he wasn't careful, he may not be able to take them down and tie them up. The nervous guy looked at him warily, but the gang were none the wiser to his presence. He lifted his finger to his mouth in a shush gesture before punching one of the gang members in the back of the head. This member had some form of mutation quirk that made him larger and possibly stronger than others. The guy stumbled forward and grabbed at the back of his head in shock. The other gang members noticed Izuku's presence quickly and all turned to him. The leader, whose quirk seemed to be robotic like arms, spoke up. Are you that guy who keeps taking down local criminals? Izuku didn't respond and instead rushed the closest criminal, who had some form of vision quirk, likely an optic zoom quirk. He grabbed the man by the arm before throwing the dude to the ground. The guy groaned but made no move to get up. Mr. Mutation Quirk charged him, but Izuku quickly sidestepped him and hit the man in the back of the neck, hoping to hit the right place and knock the guy out. Surprisingly, it worked, and the guy dropped. Izuku turned his gaze to the two left. A fourth member, who had no visible quirk, screeched and ran, leaving behind the rest of his gang. They are starting to call you Reaper Nuo because of your scythe, but you obviously aren't the type to kill. The leader clenched his fist, and you are going to regret not being that type. The guy rushed him with his fist ready to punch him. Izuku narrowly missed the punch aimed for his head and grabbed the guy's arm. With his new advantage, he jumped up and used what little he had, his weight, to push the guy to the ground. The leader cursed and tried to struggle, but Izuku quickly tied his arms together, effectively preventing his quirk from working. He climbed off the guy and tied the other two who were on the ground. After he was done with that, he went over to the victim, who hadn't run away out of fear. Hey, are you okay? He asked. Why, yeah, the guy truthfully answered. He hadn't been injured yet, but he almost had. Good, he cheerfully responded. He had gotten more confident over the last 2 days. He could really get the hang of taking down criminals. Could you call the police for these three? The guy nodded before sliding down the wall and sitting. The guy took out his phone and began dialing 110. Izuku smiled, though the guy couldn't see it due to his mask, and began climbing the wall. Once at the roof, he called down, "Be sure to say hi to that detective for me." Izuku had found out yesterday that the detective on his civilian case was also the one questioning the victims, and was probably the one on his new vigilante case. The detective focused on the victims over searching for him, and he appreciated that. After all, the victims should always be prioritized. The guy looked up at him and nodded shakily before continuing his call with the operator. Izuku proceeded to run off from the scene. It was only 11 p.m., so he had more time to search for other criminals. He was quite fortunate. He hadn't been injured outside of bruises. While he knew that he could heal from injuries, he didn't quite know the limit of his abilities. And to be frank, he didn't want to learn those limits. It was one of the only things he didn't want to learn. Hell, he wanted to learn English more than he wanted to learn those limits. Case file for the new 𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗟𝗘 vigilante. Vigilante name has multiple names. Most of the victims he saved call him Reaper afterwards. The criminals he has caught call him either Reaper or Grim Reaper. The police personally call him Spirit because of his personality towards the victims. This will be updated when a more centralized name is given. Real name, currently unknown. Age, estimates range between 15 and 25. Gender, described as male with a squeaky voice. Appearance, has a large dark, possibly black, hoodie and a black mask. Carries a scythe, but has yet to be seen using it. The police themselves haven't seen him. Has dark hair and green eyes according to witnesses. Possible quirk, unknown. None has yet to use one visually. Maybe some form of mental quirk or other hidden quirk. Personality, seemed nervous during the first week and would often stutter when talking to the victims. Stuttering has slowed down and cheerfulness and kindness shot up. Calculating and smart against the criminals he took down. Notes, can use hand-to-hand combat, though seems new to it. More info to be added. Updated as of October 24th, year 40. Age 11. 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘 side. Recently the vigilante that his team had dubbed Spirit was getting more confident. And by confident he meant it. Spirit had started staying at the scene on nearby roofs and waving at them cheerfully. Hell, there were times when the vigilante had called out to him specifically. Detective was what he usually called, but occasionally he had called out 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘, which would forever unnerve him. That meant that the vigilante had at some point heard his fellow officers call him that. It had been 2 months since the vigilante had started, and nearly every day since then he had brought in criminals. Nearly every single day. Honestly, he was both impressed and annoyed at Spirit. He was impressed because of how many criminals the vigilante had brought in, but also annoyed at how many that he had brought in. The more criminals brought in, the more paperwork 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘 has. It was frustrating. If a registered hero were to be bringing in these criminals, he wouldn't have to deal with half of the work. The hero would. But because Spirit was a vigilante, 𝗧𝗘𝗧𝗟𝗘 had to do all the work in addition to the work he has to do to document the vigilante. He was also worried. While he couldn't say how young the vigilante was, he knew that Spirit was young. If his voice and size were to go off of, that was worrying. With both the Midoriya case and the Spirit case constantly on his mind, he was almost constantly worrying. It is genuinely a surprise that he didn't have many gray hairs. By now you'd think he'd have gone completely gray. Speaking of the Midoriya case, the kid had only been spotted once since Aizawa had last seen the kid. and that one sighting was called in by someone who had seen him sitting on the edge of a building. The police never actually saw him that time though, so they didn't know his current well-being. Little did they know that he is gaining money from taking down and stealing from criminals. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 only hoped that the boy was okay. Izuku was not okay. Currently, he was being chased by a criminal that he had tried to take down, but was way too fast for him to take down. The criminal, whose quirk was obviously some form of speed quirk, was so close behind him that Izuku could hear his breathing. It was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. Izuku was trying to think of ideas to lose the guy but still catch him, but he really had no ideas. Fear can drive people to think irrationally after all. Izuku didn't realize it, but he was getting rather close to the police department. He was also starting to slow down. His body just couldn't keep up with running for so long. Izuku turned down a street and spotted the police department, and as soon as he saw it, he got an idea. Why the hell did I not think of this sooner? He ran straight at the building, or more specifically its large window, at full speed. The man behind him continued chasing, likely focusing more on him than their surroundings. His legs were aching, and he was so out of breath that he was starting to get lightheaded, but he kept running at the window. Just a few seconds before he was to hit the window, he sidestepped and let himself stop while the criminal crashed through it. The officers in the building were all alarmed at the sudden appearance of the criminal, and 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 ran from another room yelling out, "What the hell just happened?" "Yo, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘," Izuku called out while looking through the now broken window. "This guy was chasing me, so I had him run into your window." 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 grumbled before looking over at the twitching criminal. "Someone get this guy some medical attention and put him in some handcuffs." He looked back at the vigilante while signaling to his fellow officers to be cautious. "And why was he chasing you?" "'Cause I couldn't catch him." The vigilante shifted. "I was trying to catch him after he attacked a civilian, but he was way too fast. I also apparently pissed him off enough to chase me." Spirit's voice was way too cheery for him. He needed way more coffee to listen to it without feeling so drained. As soon as Spirit finished, he let out a small, "I'll leave it to you," before turning around and bolting away. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 sighed before mumbling, "Damn it." He turned to his men. "Those not locking up or healing the criminal follow me. We are going to chase after him." He left the building in a run to try to catch up to the vigilante, who was already a block away from the detective. Sansa was slowly getting ahead of him while the rest of his officers were behind him. This won't be easy. Izuku looked behind him and noticed the officer chasing him. Oh shit. I was hoping they would focus on the criminal and not me. He was still quite tired from running away from the criminal, and now he had to deal with officers who had just been sitting. Maybe using the police department's building to crash the guy wasn't such a great idea. Izuku turned a corner and nearly ran into a poor lady. He let out a quick apology before continuing. Running was most certainly not fun, and would never be fun. It left him aching and his lungs in pain. Turning into an alleyway, he went to climb up the wall, using a dumpster as a boost, because he could never climb it entirely while this exhausted. While using his arms, he went to bring himself up when one of his arms suddenly gave out on him. Shit. Izuku tumbled off the edge of the roof of the building, which was luckily only 1 story tall. He crashed to the ground right as the police turned into the alleyway. Sansa turned the corner expecting Spirit to already be gone, but what he saw was completely unexpected. Spirit was crashing to the ground after failing to climb the wall. That's a first. I've never seen, nor heard of, him failing to climb a wall. "Spirit, do not resist," he called out to the vigilante, who was now slowly getting up. "Sansa, is he?" 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘's tired voice asked while turning the corner. "Holy shit, he's still here." 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 was rather shocked at what he saw. The vigilante was currently getting off the ground. Did he trip? Or did he fall trying to climb the wall? "Spirit, just give up. You have had a long run, longer than most vigilantes. This place will be surrounded shortly. You won't be able to escape." "Yeah, no, not giving up. Sorry, detective," Spirit called out, the vigilante's voice filled with exhaustion. "I will escape, you'll see." He truly believes he will be able to escape. The how? Unexpectedly, the whole area filled with an immense pressure that practically held him in place. "Shit. Sansa, is this his quirk?" "I don't know," his partner called out. None of the officers noticed the cat on the roof. Spirit cackled. "Told ya." The vigilante quickly and successfully climbed up the building, reaching the roof. "Nice seeing you, Detective 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘, Sansa." He totally thinks of this as a game. The vigilante ran off after that and the pressure dissipated. "We were so close," one of the officers behind him called out. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 collapsed to the ground while all the running finally caught up to him. He wasn't as upset as he should be about catching Spirit. In fact, he was a little happy. We may have just found out his quirk. Izuku collapsed once he got back to his stuff. He had been running for way too long. His legs felt like jelly, and his lungs were in so much pain that he felt like he was dying. Tycho walked over and licked his face before meowing at him. "Thanks for that, Tycho. I was almost caught." I thought they were going to focus on the criminal that was chasing me. Tycho gave him a look of what the fuck do you mean by that? Oh, yeah, I pissed off a criminal and he chased me until I managed to get him to crash into the police station's large front window. Instead of focusing on him, like half the station chased me until I tried climbing that wall. I failed climbing it though and crashed to the ground. I'm fine though. My quirk got rid of the scrapes, though not the bruises. Anyways, if you had arrived any later I might have been caught. Tycho lightly swatted him on the head at the new knowledge. Yeah, I need to be more careful, he grumbled. He really should, of course, but he had never failed to take down a criminal quickly before. This criminal was quite lucky that he wasn't taken down sooner. Well, actually, he may be unlucky. If he hadn't chased Izuku, he may not have crashed into the glass windows of the station. Tycho looked at him before turning away and going to lick himself clean. Always cleaning himself. Izuku smiled. Izuku grabbed his backpack and grabbed a water bottle from within and gulped the whole thing down. Running had made him really thirsty. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 updated the spirit case file to include the vigilante's possible quirk, unaware that it was actually a cat. If he had known that a cat was the source of the pressure, he may have been able to link the two cases. Age 11, Izuku celebrated Christmas with Tycho. He got both himself and the cat plenty of sweets. He also got himself a new blanket. His old one was going to cut it anymore, especially not in the middle of winter. Though this winter wasn't as cold as the last. 4 months in and Izuku was much better off than before. Taking cash from criminals was easy, and they didn't always notice what he had done. Because of the number of criminals, still only criminals, no villains, he had been able to stop dumpster diving completely. It was amazing. He could finally eat tastier things, and so could Tycho. Though he still didn't eat much, his stomach just wouldn't be able to handle too much. He has to slowly work towards being able to eat bigger meals, until then extra cash would go to other things, or sit in his backpack. Currently Izuku was sitting at 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 beach. Well, it wasn't much of a beach anymore. He had started coming here daily roughly a month ago, during January, and going through some of the stuff. A lot of the things at 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 were scrapable. Hell, he had found an almost perfectly new laptop. The only issue he could find with it was a crack through the keyboard. Other than that, it worked fine. The crack itself, duct tape, that's all he needed to fix it, for the time being anyways, which was extremely convenient to him. With a few lessons on how to hack, he had access to the street's cameras, which are very convenient to have. A lot of the materials at the beach were metal, whether from old fridges or stuff of the like. Many of these materials are also from technology, meaning he could build his own things if he wanted to. But he wouldn't focus on doing that for now. He had other things to focus on, like his new plan, which was much easier to do now that he had a laptop. Through some not-so-legal websites, Izuku had learned how to gain a fake ID, which wasn't too hard now in the age of quirks. No, seriously, after quirks had sprung up, a new method of creating fake IDs had suddenly appeared, which was quite convenient for Izuku, of course. Currently, his plan was to gain 2 fake IDs. Why 2? Well, for one, he was small, so he would need an ID for a child, because no sane adult would classify him as an adult. And for 2, a child can't buy apartments, which he planned to do at some point. His plan was to have 2 fake IDs, one of an adult named Akatani Koni, Koni being a rearrangement of Inko, the other of Akatani's child, Akatani Makumo, Akatani being his mother's maiden name, Makumo being one of the name choices his parents had picked for him before settling on Izuku. So these names would be signaling to his mother and him. He kinda felt bad leaving out any semblance of his father in the names. Akatani Koni would purchase the apartment for her son, Akatani Makumo, who would live in it while she was on a business trip. This would give him a better place to stay. The streets weren't fun, and his back ached all the time because of the hard ground. Of course, this wouldn't be the only apartment he would get, but he would focus on that one first and foremost. The second one could wait a bit, at least until he settled down in the first one. February 25th was the day, technically night, Izuku got himself the 2 fake IDs. Just a day earlier he had specifically gotten his hair cut, specifically for 2 reasons. 1. Because he was starting to hate how long it was getting, and 2, it made him look different, even if just barely. Of course, he could have also dyed his hair, but he didn't feel like doing that. After gaining the fake IDs, he began searching around for apartments, specifically apartments that were both cheap and nearby. Once it reached 3 a.m., he decided to finally go to sleep. He could search more over the next few days to weeks. He put away the laptop in his backpack and settled down by Tycho, who was curled up asleep. After pulling the blanket over him and Tycho, he fell asleep. The very next night, Izuku was running across the rooftops looking for crime, like he did pretty much every night. Since his encounter just over 2 months ago, he had been slowly altering his costume. He had a whole plan for his costume, but some of it would be easier to create and store in an apartment, so he was only altering what he could right now, which was largely the color aspect of the costume. The hoodie stayed the same, but the thin bodysuit underneath had been changed to include some white and blue markings. While people couldn't see the markings he had added to the chest, they could see the markings on the legs. The markings themselves were jagged and wrapped around his legs. He only really added them for aesthetics though, as he was getting bored by the plain old black. A scream tore through the air and Izuku immediately turned to the direction it came from. Quickly he rushed to the area of the scream. He stopped at a nearby roof and surveyed the situation. There was what looked to be a mugging occurring. A person, with what looked like a mantis-based mutation, was being cornered by someone with some form of werewolf-like mutation quirk. Izuku hopped down from the roof and rushed Wolf Dude. With bigger guys like Wolf Dude, he found it easier to just charge at them and use his speed to his advantage. Wolf Dude heard him coming and began to turn around, but he wasn't fast enough as he got socked in the muzzle by Izuku. Wolf Dude yelped and clutched at his muzzle, letting out a large growl. Who the hell you're that Reaper guy? That name just had to stick. At least the police don't call me that. Wolf Dude barked out a laugh. You are gonna regret stopping me. Izuku narrowed his eyes as Wolf Dude ran at him. He could go about this in two ways. He could dodge to the side and quickly incapacitate him, or he could wait till the Wolf Dude was right in front of him before kicking the guy's large legs. He chose the former. He dodged and quickly jumped atop the guy, using his momentum to topple them both over. He quickly tied the guy's arms and legs. Izuku got off the guy and stood in front of him. Big mistake. His leg screamed at him as he was bitten by Wolf Dude. He quickly jumped back with a yelp. Fucking shit. I really wish my quirk would take away the pain. But no, it has to heal it first. Wolf Dude chuckled. You're not the sharpest tool in the shed, or else you would have tied my muzzle as well. He glared at the tied-up criminal. Izuku had briefly thought about that, but he had considered it too cruel to do. He honestly hadn't expected to get bitten. Izuku turned to Manty's arms. You okay? That dude is nasty. I am not. Wolf Dude howled at him. Yes, you are. Izuku briefly turned his gaze to the criminal before turning back to the victim, and can obviously do some serious damage if not quickly handled. Manty's arms nodded. I am fine. He had only just barely attacked me. Ow, all I will have is bruises. Izuku nodded with a smile. Good. I would check out your bruises later, but first you should call the police. They nodded, bringing out a small phone. What about you? He bit you. 'Tis but a scratch. I'll be fine. You worry about yourself first. He replied before cheerfully continuing. Anyways, I've got to go. Toodles. He proceeded to climb the wall, wishing he could stay to say hi to the detective, who would always grumble when he saw him, but he couldn't stay. Instead, he had to meet up with one of his contacts that he had shortly talked to a few weeks previously. This contact was one of the ones he had to pay, but it was worth it. Izuku reached the meeting place and found the guy, Thrift, waiting there. Yo, got what I asked for? He called out. Yeah, I would ask if you've got the money, but you already paid when you asked, so here. Thrift tossed over a package. It's made out of some of the best stuff in the industry, so it shouldn't break. Thanks, Thrifty. Don't call me that. Thrift huffed, though with no bite to his words. Izuku ran across the building with a smile. What was currently in his hands would be part of a major change to his costume. He made it back to Taiko, who was lazing about on the blanket. Taiko meowed at him before tilting his head at the sight of the package. Taiko, this package holds one of the best pieces of gear that I will ever have, he whispered excitedly. The cat only mewed in return. It has a voice changer. That way people won't be able to recognize me by voice. Isn't that awesome? Emro, Izuku smiled. It's gonna let me patrol without a worry about people recognizing my voice. He opened the package and his eyes somehow lit up even more as he laid eyes upon it. The shining metal of the voice changer practically glimmered. The front of it had a toothy design, and the sides connected to a leather strap that would wrap around his head. He quickly put it on to test it out. WOHCHECKOUTTHISSUTTING. He said excitedly as his voice raised and lowered in pitch. He quickly changed the setting. This one makes me deeper. I sound more mature. Taiko tilted his head and came closer, like he was analyzing the device. He likely was. After looking at it for a bit, Taiko nodded before walking away. I got Taiko's approval. Amazing. Eraserhead walked into the station. Tsukachi had called him in for a new case, this time for a vigilante. He had heard of the new vigilante in town, but he had been focusing on the Midoriya case and his job as a teacher, though the kid hadn't been seen for a while now, not since before winter. Both he and Tsukachi were concerned for the small kid. Eraserhead, welcome. This case is currently called the Spirit case. Spirit, is that what you call the new vigilante? Yes, though both criminals and civilians call him either Reaper or Grim Reaper. Why the double name? Aizawa asked, keeping a level stare at the man. Well, we, the police and officials, call him Spirit because of his personality. He's always cheerful when we see him, Tsukachi replied. Which, we see him all the time. He let out a sigh. Criminals and civilians call him Reaper because he carries a giant scythe on his back. He has yet to be seen using it, however. He typically takes down criminals quickly, and without much force. He has a scythe. Those aren't common to find around here. Yeah, we believe him to be young, possibly in his mid to late teens or a young adult. And at first he was described as having a stutter, though that seemed to stop after a bit. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 continued. A young vigilante. That's not too uncommon. Most vigilantes are between the ages of 18 and 30, Aizawa responded. The stutter could have been caused by the nervousness of starting. Anyways, what's his appearance? Well, he wears what looks to be a bodysuit with markings along the legs. He also has a large hoodie over top of it. He always carries rope on him and has a mask on. Of course, there's also the side that he carries on his back. He has what looks to be green eyes and dark, possibly black, we aren't sure, hair. I can see why he might be called Reaper. Yeah, at first when we would arrive on scene he would be gone, but recently he stopped leaving, instead opting to stay on a nearby roof. He almost always calls out to me saying, "Hey 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘," or "Detective." He knows her name. Aizawa asked, clenching his fists. Yeah, we believe he learned it from my name being said at a scene. He also knows Sansa's name, though that's my fault. The detective hesitantly added the last part. It wasn't wrong. Before that incident from 2 months ago, Spirit had never called out to Sansa by name. Usually he would say, "Cathead." But after the incident, Sansa also started being called by name. How is it your fault? Aizawa asked with an eyebrow raised. Well, about 2 months ago, just before Christmas, he had somehow pissed off a criminal and ended up getting chased for a while. How did he manage to end the chase? Well, he crashed the guy into our window. That's why you had to get it fixed. Yes, that's why it needed to be fixed. I split up my men, a group to arrest the criminal and a group to chase Spirit, and we ended up chasing him for a while. Spirit, in an attempt to climb up to a roof, fell to the ground. Sansa watched it happen. I had only just arrived. I ended up calling out Sansa's name then. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 lowered his head. How did he escape? Aizawa questioned, shifting slightly. Here's the thing, a sudden pressure appeared, practically paralyzing us in fear. We couldn't move or stop him when he climbed the wall. He called out, "Nice seeing you, Detective 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘, Sansa," which, mind you, was a true statement. What vigilante finds seeing the people meant to catch him a nice experience? After that he left, and we could do nothing about it. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 began grumbling as he finished speaking. This whole case was frustrating. Is the pressure his quirk? Yes, we believe so. I am guessing that's why I am here. To catch the prey you can't catch. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 looked away with a nod. Yeah, that's exactly why. Age 11. A week after getting the fake IDs and using them, Izuku felt confident when calling himself Akatani Mikumo. It was still weird for him though, of course. Very few change their names in life, and when they do it can take a while to get used to. Though, Izuku wasn't fully changing his name, just creating a fake identity to make life easier on himself. Which meant that technically Izuku had 4 identities. Spirit, Reaper, Izuku, Mikumo, and Koni all make 4. Whack. Of course, he wouldn't really be using Akatani Koni as anything more than someone who can buy an apartment or 2. He can also use that identity for other things as well, but for now that was his primary focus. Speaking of apartments, he had his eye on this one apartment that was on the cheaper side, but would still fit his and Taiko's needs. This apartment had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with a shower and a kitchen. Though, Izuku doubted he would be using the kitchen too much. The apartment itself had a low rent that he could easily pay for with the money he got from criminals. It would allow him to apply to an online school, which would be a lot better than just reading textbooks in a library every once in a while. And it allows pets, which is a plus. It meant he didn't have to hide Taiko while there. Just a week later Izuku had the apartment. The landlord was under the impression that his mother was on a very long business trip and had bought him the apartment. On the topic of the landlord, she was a nice old lady named Koizumi Sakura, who herself had 2 very friendly cats. The second he met her, Izuku knew he would get along fine with her. She had immediately greeted him in a very kind manner and offered him cookies, which were very good, mind you. She also quickly introduced her 2 cats, Coco and Lily. Coco was a brown cat with brilliant yellow eyes. He was also really fat and friendly. Lily was a white female cat who really loved being pet behind her ear. The second day of owning the apartment was when Izuku actually moved in with Taiko, who had immediately loved the warmth of the apartment. Taiko, unlike Izuku, had never lived in a house before and had only ever lived outside, so the warmth of being within a building was new to him. Izuku chuckled at the cat who was practically running around at his highest speed. Taiko is so happy because of the warmth, it's adorable. After taking a picture of the happy tabby cat, Izuku went and settled down on a couch that had come with the apartment. It was much more comfortable than the ground that he was used to. Taiko, after calming down a bit, jumped up to his lap and sat down with a purr. Izuku, now with a cat in his lap, grabbed his laptop from his backpack and went to sign himself up for online school. That way he could both have a proper education and have a schooling record that wasn't completely false. That way, he could get into UA when the time was right. Though, he wasn't aiming for the hero course. Of course, he wanted to be a hero, but it would be much easier to prove himself at the sports festival than at whatever their entrance exam is. Not to mention he was planning to start building his own gear, so he could use the skills he would end up getting to go to the support department, which he would be more likely to get into. After all, it was no coincidence that most pro heroes to come out of UA had flashy quirks, something Izuku didn't have. In fact, his quirk could look pretty gross at times, especially if he broke a bone. His body practically moves everything broken into place before regenerating any missing parts. Well, it's technically flashy, but not in the right way. Izuku also didn't know if his quirk could regenerate punctured organs, and he really didn't want to find out, because he had a sneaking suspicion that it either didn't or had a limit. He didn't want to risk it. After he finished signing up for online school, he decided to shower properly for the first time in nearly 2 years. He carefully lifted Taiko off his lap and closed the laptop. Taiko meowed while being picked up but let himself be put off to the side. Once he was done showering, Izuku went into the main bedroom and let himself lay down in it. It was comfy, even comfier than the couch. Scratch that, its comfort wasn't measurable on any scale. It was just that much more comfier. Before he knew it, he was asleep. It was currently 11 p.m. and 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 was currently rushing in his car to the scene of the most recent sighting of Spirit after 2 weeks of nothing. He had just gotten off a call with Aizawa, who was close to the scene. He planned to finally capture Spirit today. He was quite lucky that Aizawa was close by to the scene. With Aizawa there, they could cancel out Spirit's quirk, allowing them to finally bring him in. Finally, after roughly 5 months of him being active, we may finally be bringing him in. He turned the corner that led to the scene and saw Spirit on top of one of the roofs, waiting for them. Though, as he got closer, he noticed something different about the vigilante. His mask had changed to something made of metal, unlike the typical cloth mask that he typically wore. He exited his police car and went in front of the building the vigilante was on, letting his men enter the alleyway where the criminal was, along with the 3 victims that the guy had pulled a knife on. Spirit, he called up to the vigilante, who was unaware that Aizawa was on his way. Right now, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 was going to stall the vigilante as long as possible so that Aizawa could easily capture him. Yo, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏, the vigilante gestured at the down criminal. The guy down there has a strength quirk. He was a pain to deal with. The vigilante's voice sounded older than it normally did, and it had a slight echo to it. Ah, so that's what the metal mask is. It's a voice changer. Is that why he felt safe attacking 3 people with a knife? He asked, more so to himself, but he spoke loud enough that the vigilante could hear him. Yup, based on how he acted and moved, he was practically flaunting his strength quirk. It was strange. The vigilante called down. He reminded me of Endeavor, always flaunting his strength at any moment. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏 couldn't help but chuckle. The vigilante wasn't wrong about that. Endeavor has always been known for flaunting his strength. Yeah, that truly had to have been a pain. Yup, the vigilante cheerfully responded. Say, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗧, I think this is the longest you have ever talked to me. Usually you try to ignore me cause you can't chase me. Just as Spirit stated that Aizawa showed up a few buildings down. But it didn't seem as if the vigilante noticed him. Good. Aizawa finally made it to the scene. He noted both the police on the ground and the figure on the rooftop a few buildings down. The vigilante hadn't noticed him yet. Excellent. The underground hero silently made his way behind Spirit, who was holding a conversation with 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗧. He kept his quirk active on the vigilante, ensuring that the vigilante's quirk wouldn't work. He sent out his capture weapon, but Spirit jumped out of the way of the weapon. What the fuckity fuck? The vigilante called out. He obviously hadn't expected him to be here, yet he dodged. Interesting. Spirit hopped across the buildings to look back at Aizawa. His eyes were wide and in a state of shock. What the hell? 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗧, you were distracting me, weren't you? The vigilante called out, accusation filling his voice. Yeah, I was. We're going to arrest you today. Come quietly and you won't get hurt in the process. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏𝗏𝗧 replied in a near monotonous voice. Spirit laughed at that. Nope, I'm leaving. The vigilante flipped around and rushed across the rooftops. Aizawa quickly followed, keeping his gaze focused on the vigilante, though he was confused at why the vigilante hadn't tried to use his quirk. Yes, he wouldn't have been able to, but he should have freaked out about not being able to use it. Get back here, Spirit. The vigilante only chuckled at that. Damn, he's fast. Spirit began jumping over another building when his foot slipped at the edge. The vigilante let out a yelp and fell to the alleyway below. Aizawa stopped at the roof's edge, his gaze still on the vigilante below, whose arm seemed to be broken. With the vigilante cornered now, he wasn't going to let himself blink. He didn't feel like being paralyzed. Age 11, fate would not allow Taiko to help Izuku this time. Both sides had something to learn. Izuku looked up at Eraserhead, his eyes full of fear and pain. His left arm was broken, if the way it was bent was anything to go by. He had known Eraserhead's quirk, but he had hoped it wouldn't be used while he was injured. Shit, my arm is in a ton of pain. I'm not used to having to deal with pain for this long. Give up, Spirit. You'll only get more hurt if you keep running. It'd be best for you to just turn yourself in now. Eraserhead called down to him. His red eyes were glowing and his hair was floating upwards. Nope. Izuku winced as he moved a little too quickly. Hopefully Eraserhead would let up his quirk soon. I'll be fine, cause you won't be able to catch me. Eraserhead narrowed his eyes and flung his capture weapon down at the boy. Izuku dodged and, using his unharmed hand, grabbed his scythe to fight with for the first time since becoming a vigilante. Scythes are meant to be used with both hands, but he would have to manage. The capture weapon flung back at him and Izuku used the blade at the end of his scythe to cut through part of the scarf. The cut-off part of the scarf fell to the ground, but the remaining scarf kept coming at him and eventually grabbed at his scythe, pulling it out of his grip. Izuku yelped as his scythe was pulled away. He jumped forward to re-grab his scythe. He grabbed at the grip and yanked it back, nearly sending the underground hero tumbling off the roof. With his scythe back in his hands, Izuku pointed it at Eraserhead. As I said, I am not getting captured today. You're acting like a stubborn child. If you let yourself get captured, you'll have that arm of yours healed and you won't get hurt any further. Izuku shrunk at the mention of him acting like a child. Eraserhead noticed this and took a step closer to the edge of the rooftops. Izuku stepped back, feeling the bricks of the hard wall behind him. Don't tell me you are actually a child, Spirit. Eraserhead growled out. So what if I am? Makes no difference. Izuku spat out, a little quieter than he intended. Damn, wait, no, this may make it easier for me to escape. He will likely underestimate me now. Eraserhead was obviously irritated now. Of course you're a child, of fucking course. He growled out before hopping off the roof and into the alleyway. Izuku inched closer to the sidewalk just a few meters away. What does it matter? Children aren't supposed to be out trying to be heroes. Eraserhead muttered, his gaze staying level, though it was obvious that he was starting to struggle to not blink. The whites of his eyes were nearly as red as his iris. Oh well. Izuku glared at the man, before rapidly swinging his scythe towards the man, who naturally jumped back and blinked. Izuku took this chance, since his quirk was temporarily back, to run out into the street. His legs began burning from just how fast he was running. The quicker he could get away, the better. His arm hurt like hell and he wanted to get away to let it heal. He could hear the faint footsteps of the Erasure hero, but they were getting fainter by the minute. He was damn lucky that he was so short. It made him faster than most people taller than him. Not to mention, he had a lot of stamina and strength. Eventually, he stopped hearing the footsteps behind him, so he stopped. His arm was now fully healed and bent the right way. It also no longer hurts, which was great. He looked around and ran into the nearest alleyway to climb up to the roofs. From there, he could run back to his apartment, where Tycho was. Should I tell Tycho that I broke my arm? He briefly asked himself. No, he'll freak out. He worries too much. Entering his apartment through the window in his bedroom, he slipped onto the carpet and breathed out a sigh of relief. All of that was intense. I thought I was going to get caught. Tycho entered the room with a meow, right as Izuku took off his voice changer. Hey Tycho, I think they put Eraserhead on the spirit case, cause he nearly caught me. Tycho let out a row of shock before rushing forward and sniffing around him. His quirk is only active when he is looking at someone, it doesn't stay active after. I'm fine. Tycho seemed to calm down at that, though. I think I am taking another break from vigilantism. That was enough stress for the week. I'll just focus on my online school work for now. Tycho nodded before jumping up to Izuku's bed. The boy smiled before sitting on his bed to pet the cat for a few minutes. After a while, Izuku got up and grabbed some clothes before going to change in the bathroom. He really didn't want to stay in his bodysuit and hoodie for much longer. Once he was done changing, he collapsed back onto his bed to sleep. He was both physically and mentally exhausted from what that night had brought him. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 yelled out as he returned to the scene. Eraserhead. How did he get away? The detective shouted out at him. Unimportant. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 spirit is a child, much younger than any previous estimates, though I am still uncertain of his exact age. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 took a moment to process the information. What? But I am 100% sure of it. He reacted when I told him he was acting like a child. I replied with, don't tell you are actually a child, spirit. And he then replied with, so what if I am? Makes no difference. He's a child. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 spluttered at that, his quirk having registered everything as true. Oh, and he actually used his scythe, though one-handed because he broke his left arm after falling off a roof. He's never used the scythe before. I thought he didn't know how to use it. I thought it was aesthetic. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 responded. Yeah, that's what I thought, but he grabbed it without a second thought and seemed to know how to use it. Though, I am not trained in one, so I am unsure if he was using it entirely correctly. Aizawa replied. His voice was level, hiding his worry. No child should know how to use a scythe. Although I'm unsure of his age, no one below the age of 16 should even be learning something like that. It's not even traditionally taught in any school or dojo. 𝗧𝗜𝗧𝗟𝗘 sighed. Did he at any point manage to use his quirk? No, my eyes are still really dry after how long I went without blinking. He paused. It was strange, he never questioned about his quirk being gone. That is strange, the detective whispered, more so to himself than to those around him. Strange indeed. Both Aizawa and Tsukachi returned to the station to continue their conversation on what happened. Once done, they were both left confused, feeling as if they had missed a piece in the giant puzzle that is Spirit. Spirit had both not questioned his lack of quirk, and had used his scythe. Both were unexpected to the two. However, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't figure out what the missing piece was. They were left clueless. Neither of them thought to connect the Spirit and Midoriya cases. Maybe, if Aizawa had let up his quirk sooner and had managed to see Izuku's quirk, he might have figured it out that the missing piece wasn't so missing, but rather placed in the wrong place. Spirit didn't have a pressure paralysis quirk at all. 2 months later, and it was the 2nd anniversary of him running away. Though he wasn't really thinking about that, in fact, he was bored. This wasn't an uncommon occurrence, of course, but this time he decided to hack something to help cure the boredom. Though he was unsure of how to go about hacking this specific place. Its security was high, so high that it was considered one of the most secure places in Japan. So hacking it should be very hard. But Izuku was up to the challenge. The system had multiple layers to it, and slowly but surely Izuku was getting through it. Just a few more layers, he thought, when a message suddenly appeared on his screen. The second he read the message, he exited all his hacking software and shut off his laptop. Maybe I should try hacking into UA at a later date. I don't want to be caught again. Though my laptop should be encrypted enough to not let anyone see my address. He shivered before firmly leaving his room and entering the living room. Taiko meowed at him before moving between his legs, wanting attention. Izuku chuckled before bending down and petting the cat, letting Taiko distract him from the fact that he was caught hacking into UAS servers. Nezu chuckled as the hacker suddenly stopped. Not many dare to hack into UAS system. This is interesting. Very interesting indeed. Nezu smiled to himself. No matter what, he must find out whoever this hacker was. He didn't care what tactics it would take. He would find this person, and he would find out their motives for hacking into his domain. Now, time to start decrypting all of this data. This'll be fun. It looks to have well over 5 layers of well-made encryption. Whoever this is, they really don't want to be found. This will be a great distraction for the next while. Age 11. Izuku was currently sitting atop a building on his laptop, hacking into street cameras. 2 weeks had passed since he had tried to hack UA, and he was not going to try that again anytime soon. I'm going to have to get better to even attempt that again. If I even dare attempt it again. It was still daylight, so he wouldn't be doing anything outside of hacking for a few hours. He sighed before scrolling back through the camera feeds. Maybe he'd find something funny. Maybe someone running into a post or something. He clicked the right arrow button on his laptop to switch to the next camera, one that was only a few streets down, and noticed a villain fighting a hero. The fight itself was flashy to say the least. They're dragging out the fight with the villain. This fight could have been ended by now, but they are fighting for karma points. The villain, who was now run ragged and was obviously exhausted, let out a sudden large explosion and the camera cut. What the hell? I thought their quirk was a simple light quirk. Could all those flashes before actually have been explosions? Izuku began muttering all the possibilities of the true nature of the villain's quirk. Could it be an explosion quirk, similar to Kaken's, that also exudes large amounts of light? Is the light a separate aspect? Or was the light simply a flash from the explosion? But then how would the light show without an explosion? He kept thinking and muttering, despite the fighting having obviously stopped. He just couldn't help himself. There were so many possibilities, and he wanted to try to figure which one was most accurate. Though, obviously he would have to guess which is more accurate, unless a report came out stating the villain's quirk. Unlikely, they usually don't have fights like this one. He stopped himself from continuing. It was for the best to stop his thinking before he got distracted for hours. That's some interesting deductions, young hacker. A voice sounded from behind him. Izuku had to stop himself from falling face first off of the roof. The Fui turned around and his face paled. Why the hell is the principal of UA behind me? It looks like I startled you. Am I a mouse, a bear, a dog? Who knows? But I am the principal of UA. And you, my young vigilante, are the one who hacked into UA 2 weeks ago. Shit. Apparently his protective measures and encryption weren't enough. The rat had found him. A weight appeared on his shoulder and suddenly Taiko was there. Is the Nezu so dangerous that Taiko felt the need to teleport here? Holy shit. Taiko stayed on his shoulder and hissed at the principal. Oh dear, I've frightened both him and you. Nezu's face was calm. Nezu had spent the last 2 weeks decrypting all of the data. It was all tedious work, nothing too complex compared to what he or some of the best villains could do, but it sure did take a while. 2 weeks was probably the longest he had ever had to decrypt someone's hacking data. And to think it was the small vigilante, a child, he reminded himself, in front of him that did it. When the boy's cat appeared, he kept his face calm. After all, he had learned to keep his face straight even after the most unsavory events. Though he couldn't deny that he was sort of shocked that the cat could teleport. Clue 1. Stay away from my brother. The cat hissed at him. Brother? They must be fairly close. Most common house pets call those they have attached to their human or their owner. It's uncommon for an animal to use any other terminology. Not to mention he seems to be able to teleport. Oh dear, I've frightened both him and you. He called out to the boy. He didn't want to frighten either of them when he came here. He was merely curious about who had attempted to hack UA. Though it being a child vigilante definitely left him curious. Now that he could see the vigilante clearly, he noticed something. The boy's hair was green and felt familiar. Clue 2 of the two-piece puzzle. He thought through it before coming to his conclusion. The two boys that Aizawa had been complaining about were one and the same. I can't wait to see his face when he realizes it. It'll be hilarious, but I won't reveal it to him. He has to come to the conclusion on his own. He inwardly smirked at the thought. Leave us alone. The cat continued hissing. I mean no harm. I was merely curious to see the one who hacked into UA, Nezu replied, though it was interesting to see that the two children that Aizawa has been frustrated over are the same. The boy's eyes widened and a pressure escaped from the cat. Nezu faced the pressure calmly. You felt worse. As I stated, I mean no harm. I'll keep your identity a secret. The pressure vanished, though the tabby was still glaring. Though, I have to ask, as a hero myself, are you still on the streets? Midoriya shook his head. And no, the boy replied before turning his head to the cat. Taiko, you can stop glaring. The sea, Taiko, meowed in reply to the boy. I don't trust him. I think he is safe. For now. Besides, if he wanted to he could have had me locked up by now. Midoriya responded truthfully to Taiko, obviously having understood the cat's meow, even though he didn't know exactly what he had said. Quite right, Nezu responded cheerfully. After all, what the boy had said was true. Taiko glared at him for a moment, before deciding to just turn away instead of hiss again. I have to say I am impressed. When I had found you hacking into my domain I would have never thought you were such a young child. Not to mention when you were analyzing that villain's quirk. Your analysis is already better than my 3rd years. Midoriya brought up a hand to his neck. Obviously not used to being praised by someone other than the civilians he helped. You, thanks. Yup. He popped the pea. It's truly fascinating how smart you are. Did you learn to analyze while doing your vigilante work? Or have you been doing it for longer than that? Since I was a child, Nezu sir. None of that sir, just call me Nezu, and that is very impressive. Were you taught by someone? Or did you pick it up yourself? He may be asking too many questions, but this kid was like a puzzle. There was something very different about this kid. I started on my own, but my father helped me, Midoriya responded, obviously saddened by the mere thought of his father. That's amazing, Nezu carefully responded, making sure not to talk of the boy's father. The green-haired boy smiled before speaking softly. Thank you. Taiko turned back around and looked at Nezu before meowing. You are being kind and not trying to catch him, unlike Eraserhead. Why? Well, Taiko, I, unlike Aizawa, know that trying to catch a young and intelligent vigilante isn't going to end well. Midoriya looked confused for a second before realizing that Nezu could hear what Taiko was saying. You can understand Taiko. The boy's eyes were full of wonder and amazement. Yeah, I can communicate with nearly any animal. It's how I plan to take over the world. He let out a sadistic laugh. Midoriya looked vaguely horrified. You not serious are you? The boy asked, slightly terrified. Who knows? He chuckled, a large grin on his furred face. Midoriya smiled, albeit hesitantly. Aizawa grumbled. He had just expelled the entirety of this year's class. They had potential in the beginning, but they just weren't willing to improve. They'd have died if they continued like that. It was best to stop them now, before they got themselves killed. He was currently on his way to Nezu's office. Nezu seemed very interested in something this past few weeks. I wonder what it is. He shook his head. Now was not the time to start thinking of something else. He had to notify the principal of the students he had just expelled. He stepped into the office, expecting to see the rat. What he saw instead was an empty room, with no principal in sight. What the hell? He almost never leaves his office. Aizawa walked out of the office confused. The only next logical place was that the principal was in the teacher's lounge, likely talking to Majima, who had a free period right now. He opened the door to the lounge and found Majima alone. What? Oh, Aizawa, what are you doing here? Don't tell me you expelled your entire class again. Didn't you? Majima called out, his voice full of exasperation. Unimportant, where is Nezu? Aizawa asked. He had expected Nezu to be here. Where the hell is that damn rat? Oh, he said he had a private matter to attend to. He had a large grin on his face. It was terrifying. Aizawa glowered before grabbing his extra sleeping bag from behind the lounge couch and collapsing on the ground. Of course he is attending a private matter. I wonder who's dying today. He sighed. Wake me up when he is back. So you did expel your whole class, Majima exclaimed, but Aizawa just ignored him. choosing to fall asleep instead. Age 12. Over the next few months, 𝗧𝗓 would occasionally disappear from UA to check up on the kid. They began to form a schedule where the rat, bear, mouse would meet with Midoriya. On the roof they had initially met every 2 weeks. He always brought his tea. It took a few meetings for Taiko to trust him, but 𝗧𝗓 understood why. After all, if he was the cat, he wouldn't trust himself either. No one would. 𝗧𝗓 chuckled to himself as he thought about the cat. He most definitely has intelligence mixed into his quirk. What is he chuckling about? The voice of 𝗧𝗓𝗧 sounded from across the room. She was whispering to Aizawa, but the rat could hear her. I don't know, but I don't like it. Aizawa muttered back from within his sleeping bag. Usually 𝗧𝗓 would be in his office right now, but this time he had decided to stay in the teacher's lounge for lunch. He liked seeing if he could hear about anything students may have said or done. Last week, one of the students had apparently temporarily lost control of their quirk, leading them to be stuck in a wall. He's been sneakier recently, 𝗧𝗓𝗧 whispered again. Do you think that is why? Oh God, I sure hope not. Ever since the start of June he has been giddy about something. Not to mention he disappears once every 2 weeks. I've found someone interesting. He piped up. He wasn't going to state who he had found interesting, but he knew just the mention of someone being interesting to him would scare the young heroes. 𝗧𝗓𝗧 nearly screeched and Aizawa sank lower within his sleeping bag. Yamada, who had been on his phone the whole time, looked up in alarm. They all knew what it meant for 𝗧𝗓 to have found someone interesting. It meant chaos. Age 12. Izuku found that talking to 𝗧𝗓 was quite fun, despite all of the rat's creepy talk about taking over the world one day. I can't tell if he is serious about that. He was currently working on one of his little projects, specifically one of his support item projects. He was building a sensory item that can both hear things from far away and cancel out signals from nearby devices using a button on the headset itself. It was going to help him quite a lot in the future. It would practically ensure no one could sneak up on him and would allow him to prevent people from recording him too often, though it wouldn't be constantly active, obviously. This headset was one of the many changes to come to his outfit. One of those things was that he would stop bringing the jacket with him, which would happen within the next week if his supplier allowed it. It made him get unnecessarily hot. Not to mention that he was going to be adding body armor and a bulletproof vest to the costume. Those would be pretty hard to put on with the jacket there. Maybe on super cold nights he would get his jacket, but for now, while it was fall, it was unnecessary. Anyways, all the extra armor was more to prevent him from receiving lethal injuries than anything else. While he certainly didn't like feeling pain, he knew that the pain would disappear quickly because of his quirk. But he couldn't say the same about lethal injuries. After a few hours, he was finally putting the final wire in place. Now was the time to put it into practice and hope it doesn't explode. Because it connected to his voice changer, he had to go grab it to test his headset. With the mask in place, he began to put the headset in place. It snapped into place and he made a squeak in satisfaction. He quickly did a shake test to ensure that it wouldn't fall off, and it stayed. He turned the device on so that he could see if the hearing part of it worked and smiled when it worked. He could hear the slightest creak from Taiko walking in the other room, and he could also hear his neighbor snoring quietly. With a small yes, he proceeded to check if the other aspect of it could work. After shutting off the hearing aspect, of course, he turned the aspect on and found that it in fact did work. Considering his phone suddenly stopped working, he turned it off and had a bright smile on his face. It worked. Of course, it wasn't up to par with what Thrift could make, but he had made it with his 2 hands, and it worked. He couldn't test it in the field now, as it was the middle of the day, but once it became time, he most certainly would be testing the device. It isn't like a traditional headset, as it doesn't connect over his head. I just didn't know what else to call it. It only connects to his voice changer and is on both sides. Izuku was quite happy with the turnout of his headset. It was helping him a lot on his current route. So far he had already stopped 2 muggings, and both were well out of his normal hearing range. It's already helping me so much. He heard a scream from a few blocks away and immediately turned directions, heading towards the scream, turning off his headset so he didn't get overwhelmed by every noise during the fight. As soon as he arrived on scene, he was met with a gruesome sight. There's no way she is still alive. There, laid across the ground, just in front of an alleyway, was a girl with multiple stab wounds all over her. Her killer stood just over top of her. Her killer was obviously young, perhaps still a teenager. His hair was lime green in color and it was spiky. Izuku quickly scanned the whole area. Looking for the weapon, he found no sign of a weapon. Not even one. Is it his quirk? Possibly. I have to watch out. In a flash, the guy was next to him. What the hell? The guy manifested some blades and they flew at Izuku. So that's 2 of them sliced through Izuku's right arm. The rest missed entirely. How? Izuku jumped back with a yelp. The guy sent his blades back at Izuku and he had to dodge to the right. One narrowly missed his face. Izuku backed up as far as he could. He was now at the edge of the rooftop. If he were to back up any further, he would fall. So you are the vigilante that's been roaming for a while now. The guy's snake-like voice sent shivers down Izuku's spine. So what if I am? Many criminals and villains want you dead. I wonder how much money I could receive if I showed up with your head. Izuku's eyes widened, and he readied his stance to use his scythe at any given moment. This guy is insane. The guy rushed forward with his blades, and Izuku froze. Despite having been a vigilante for just about a year now, Izuku had never dealt with someone that could scare him this much. In a split-moment decision, he rushed forward, dodging the blades, and tackled the guy. They tumbled to the other edge of the building. Izuku jumped off of the guy and down into the alleyway. Taking the chance while the guy was dazed, he rushed away. He could call the police and they could easily dispatch heroes to take down this guy. He wasn't going to attempt it himself. That guy was too insane and strong for him at the moment. After calling the police, he settled down on a rooftop far from the incident and let himself finally take in everything he just saw and experienced. I saw a dead person and could have died myself. That day was the first time he saw someone who had died. That was the first time he failed to make it on time. Age 12, ever since Izuku first saw a dead person's body, he had begun speeding up arriving on scene, even if it meant being completely out of breath before getting to any criminal. He didn't want it to happen again. He never wanted to see another dead body. Of course, he knew it was likely that he would. But if he could help it, he would at least see them less. Seeing a dead body is not uncommon in a world full of powers. Over the past week, since the incident, he had been largely staying off duty. He just really didn't feel like patrolling much at the moment. In fact, he didn't really feel like doing anything at all. But alas, he couldn't sit still either. So he has been working on other gadgets that may help him, while he waits for his body armor and bulletproof vest. Speaking of those items, he should be able to pick them up tomorrow. Taiko meowed at him from a few meters away. Taiko still doesn't know what Izuku had seen. Izuku refused to tell him, but the cat obviously knew something had happened. After all, who wouldn't notice someone's mood dropping so significantly? He also hadn't told 𝗧𝗓 yet. They hadn't even had one of their bi-weekly meetings yet, since the next one was in 3 days. He knew for a fact that 𝗧𝗓 would notice the difference. He also knew that there was no way that 𝗧𝗓 somehow would get it out of him. The rat had his ways. Yes, Taiko, he replied to the tabby. Taiko just tilted his head, as if thinking, before walking forward and pressing his paw to the boy's leg. I'm fine, he replied with a small fake smile. He had long learned how to know what the cat meant when he put his paw to his leg. The cat obviously didn't believe him and hopped up on Izuku's lap and purred. Izuku put the stuff he was working on down on the table before putting all of his attention on the cat. Maybe he could take a small break and pet the cat. Izuku ended up falling asleep while petting Taiko. Taiko was still awake and purring for the boy. He knew that purring calmed Izuku, even while he was asleep. So for as long as he was awake, he would purr his heart out. Taiko went with Izuku to his next meeting with 𝗧𝗓. While Taiko didn't yet fully trust the rat, he smells more like a stoat really, but stoats don't stay white all year long. But who knows how his quirk affected his body? Considering how different it obviously is, he did know that he could probably figure out what was wrong with his brother. 𝗧𝗓 was smart like that. Currently, Izuku was in his new gear. The boy always patrolled after meeting with 𝗧𝗓, so wearing his gear was easier. Taiko joined Izuku on these patrols, but largely stayed out of sight, though there was one time a knife had been thrown at him. As soon as he and Izuku arrived, 𝗧𝗓 immediately asked what was wrong. He figured out scarily fast, despite Izuku wearing his voice changer right now. The voice changer wasn't on though. There was no need to hide his voice from 𝗧𝗓. Izuku was obviously surprised, and Taiko, who was on the boy's shoulders, nudged the boy's face with his paw. That seemed to make Izuku realize that no matter what, he couldn't keep it to himself. How did you know something was wrong? Izuku asked, his voice breaking slightly. Whatever happened is still deeply affecting him. You are slumping more than usual, and your eyes are showing a ton of emotion, 𝗧𝗓 replied calmly to the boy. Well, Taiko prevented the boy from continuing by covering his mouth with a tail. Izuku would need a minute to compose his emotions. 𝗧𝗓 looked over at Taiko. I myself am unsure what happened to my brother, as he wouldn't tell me, but I can tell you when it happened and how it has affected him. 𝗧𝗓 nodded, understanding that Taiko should explain what he knows now, so that Izuku may not have as much grief over talking about whatever happened. Taiko continued meowing. 10 days ago, Izuku came back in tears and was obviously upset. The tabby let out what sounded like a sigh. He stopped patrolling as often, or as long, and he started focusing on his gadgets. I tried to get him to talk to me throughout that whole time, but it was like he shut off. He just refused to tell me. He also began having extreme nightmares afterwards. 𝗧𝗓 grimaced before turning to Izuku. Taiko removed his tail. Are you okay with telling me now? Izuku nodded hesitantly. I will try. The boy sighed heavily before continuing. I was too late to saving someone. Nezu's eyes widened, while Taiko nearly fell off of Izuku's shoulders in shock. Oh dear, Nezu started before coming forward and placing a paw on one of the boy's arms. I am sorry that you had to see something like that at such a young age. Izuku shook his head. There is no need for you to be sorry. I knew that I would at some point be, but I wasn't prepared. Taiko brushed his head against the side of Izuku's head and let out a comforting purr. I also nearly got caught by the killer. I had to run and call the cops. Nezu grimaced again while squaring his paw in a comforting way, as if saying, I understand, which he most certainly did. Taiko wrapped himself around Izuku's shoulders and began purring so hard that his purr kept getting cut off every few seconds. Both Nezu and Taiko comforted Izuku for the next few hours, and Izuku ended up not patrolling at all that day, and he slept for the whole night without any dreams or nightmares. Aizawa opened the door to Nezu's office and entered it with a huff. Nezu, you were gone until late yesterday. You're never out that late. Nezu immediately understood what Aizawa was trying to ask. Why were you gone? Might as well answer him, though vaguely of course, since he really shouldn't be saying. I met with a known vigilante, who is also a missing kid, and he ended up telling me that he saw a dead body and that he was blaming himself because he didn't go quick enough. He couldn't say that at all. Well, he tried to keep his voice calm. I had to console someone. They ended up seeing a dead body last week, and it ended up affecting them. He made sure to keep out Izuku's pronouns. That was a part of his identity, and Nezu didn't want to let too much out about him. Honestly, the rat wished he could do more for Izuku, but he had trouble communicating his emotions or even showing empathy. Aizawa was obviously surprised by the answer and let out a small, oh, before going. I'm sorry that they, whoever they are, ended up seeing a dead body. That really affects anyone. Nezu lowered his head. Yeah, they were pretty upset over it. He clenched his paw. Pretty upset didn't really state just how affected the boy was. Well, I will leave you alone now. I won't tell anyone that you ended up helping them. If any of them ask, I'll just say that you had to do something important, which isn't a lie. Aizawa spoke before turning around and leaving Nezu in his office. Nezu had gotten attached to the young boy, who was quite intelligent for his age, and when he saw just how lost Izuku looked, he felt the need to protect and console the boy. Over the next few months, it quickly reached the end of fall and the beginning of winter. Izuku still has nightmares about the incident at least once a week. His current gear allowed him to be easily protected, and for that he was grateful. Recently, the criminals have been upping their ante and have been getting more and more violent, so Izuku found himself needing the armor. He couldn't count how many times someone tried stabbing him in the gut, only to find that their knife couldn't get through his armor. It was terrifying, though he was quite pleased to see that his armor worked. Izuku also found himself taking more breaks, allowing Taiko to help him relieve stress by petting him, which usually worked. He also did a lot of stretching to help with his stress and emotions. His stretching both trained him and made him unable to think of anything but the stretch itself. It was really helpful. Age 12. Izuku was given a whole new phone on Christmas. It came from Nezu, who had decided to buy the boy a new one, since Izuku had been insisting on using his old one instead of buying himself a new one. Nezu had noted that the boy had stated, "It still works," instead of "I don't have the ability to buy a new one," or something similar. Age 13. Izuku was currently running from the police. They had decided to chase from the ground while he ran across the roofs. It was annoying, because their police cars were much quicker than he was. Detective Tsukachi was currently yelling over a microphone for him to stop running. He thinks he can catch the Great Spirit today. Nope. Right now it was only the police chasing him, no heroes. He was fortunate for that. After all, the heroes could easily chase him on the roofs instead of the ground, unlike the police. He knew it was only a matter of time before they ended up giving up, or calling in a hero. They had been chasing him for roughly half an hour now. He was getting tired from all the running. Of course, he could just dupe the cops by flattening himself against one of the roofs, or by standing still long enough for them to get out of their cruisers and then bolting. But he didn't really feel like it. He just wants them to leave him alone. And he wanted them to leave him alone by giving up, not by being duped by him. It was more satisfying that way. The only reason he was being chased right now is because he was sitting on the edge of a building with his gear on and had been spotted by someone who thought he was a villain. Which I am not. I'm just a vigilante. Yes, still not legal. But I am at least not someone who will just attack you. Well, if you aren't committing a crime, I won't. This is why he shouldn't be sitting around in the middle of the day while in gear. Yo, he yelled out to the cop cars below while he ran. Though he doubted they could actually hear him. You have been chasing me for almost 45 minutes. Why won't you just give up? He jumped over to the next roof, but his jump landed just short. He was now barely holding onto the edge of the building with his hands. He quickly brought himself onto the roof by pulling himself up. Well, that sucks, but it wouldn't have happened if they hadn't been chasing me for so long. I would be way less exhausted. Like seriously though, don't they have better things to do? Just because they are chasing me doesn't mean that there isn't any crime going on. Seriously, hell, I am starting to wish they would just leave it to a hero. They would underestimate me and I would be able to finally get away. He heard footsteps behind him and whipped his head around. Speak of the devil and he shall arrive. With a yelp, Izuku tried to speed up his pace. But ultimately he couldn't go any faster. He was going as fast as he could. Behind him was Eraserhead. Of all the heroes they could have called in, they had to call in him. It is literally the middle of the day. Kid, stop running. Eraserhead called out from behind him, but Izuku quickly retorted, hell no, and don't call me kid. I know you know my vigilante name. He did not like being called a kid. He was a vigilante that had been in the field for almost 2 years now, and he had caught many criminals, and as of recently villains. Calling him a kid made him feel undermined for all of that. You are a kid, so I find the name fitting, kid. Eraserhead responded with. The hero had a lot more stamina and energy than Izuku did, but that didn't matter. By calling him kid, it showed that he obviously underestimated him. Either that, or he was doing it to infuriate him. Both were possible, very possible, any other hero. And they would be underestimating me, despite the evidence. But Eraserhead has chased me on many occasions. While he has definitely underestimated me on many occasions, he has more experience, and knows not to underestimate me too much. It is much harder to escape him than the other heroes. He briefly thought of an incident from last month, where Eraserhead had managed to catch him in his scarf. He had only managed to escape that time because he had managed to kick Eraser with his steel-toed boots in the gut. He did not feel guilty for doing that. Not one bit. It is not fitting, you asshole. He surprised himself with his own response. If I were not in my outfit, I would not be able to say that to him. Holy shit. Eraserhead ignored his words. Kid, you have been running for well over 30 minutes. Give up. I have a feeling that you will not have a harsh punishment since you are a kid, so just let me bring you in. Izuku growled but didn't respond. He should focus on running now. Oh great. This sure is familiar. He thought as he stopped at the intersection that was too large for him to cross. The same one from the first time he met Eraserhead. The police cars had caught up below him. They had been slowed down by traffic shortly after Eraser had begun chasing him. He looked back at Eraserhead, who was smiling now. Has anyone ever told him that he should see a therapist for that smile? He is terrifying when he is smiling. See, there is no escape now. Izuku nearly laughed at that. I was really hoping I could test with these before I used them, but I guess I have to try now. He smirked, though the man couldn't see it. He quickly jumped to the sidewalk below, where the police were, and grabbed into his pocket. He threw the smoke bombs he had created that morning onto the ground. They were something he had never created before, and as such, he wasn't too hopeful for them to work without testing and rebuilding. Much to his amazement, they worked and the area was filled with smoke. Using the distraction, he began running along the sidewalk as fast he could, hoping to escape. The smoke itself had great range, as he had to run well over 10 meters to escape it. He nearly ran into a wall in the process. But hey, at least it reached all the cops in the area, along with Eraserhead. He only knew it reached Eraserhead because of the sudden, shit, I can't see anything, from the man. If they had chosen any other hero, I wouldn't have had to use such a gamble. I could probably escape from top heroes better than him. He instantly regretted that thought as he spotted a top hero just down the street. Speak of the devil and he shall appear. The top hero wasn't just any top hero either, it was the fucking number 2 hero, Endeavor. You know, the one with the highest kill rate of all heroes in Japan, who also had the 3rd highest kill rate of any hero in the entire world. Yeah, that Endeavor. Endeavor quickly spotted him running from the now smoke-filled area. Shit, I am done for. Eraserhead, who had just now escaped the smoke, noticed the hero and the vigilante and screamed something. But it didn't reach Izuku's ears as a fireball the size of him hit him. He felt a searing pain go through his whole body, while the feeling of his quirk activated. He let out a scream of pain before quickly running into an alleyway. His whole body was in pain, but his quirk was working. He would be physically fine. The burns only reached his skin and couldn't kill him, though any hotter and they would have burnt him to his bones, with no possibility of survival. His ears hadn't healed just yet, so he couldn't hear Eraserhead's yells as he managed to climb the building, only after nearly falling though. Tycho felt something was deeply wrong. His whole body was itchy. He immediately tried to activate his quirk, but it didn't activate the first time. With a hiss of frustration, he tried again and managed to teleport to his running brother, who was burned across his whole body. He quickly hopped down from Izuku's shoulder and ran alongside him. He let out his pressure the whole time, ensuring no one could follow them as they made it back to Izuku's main apartment. He had finally bought the second one 6 months previously, but it was too far away to head to at the moment. At the apartment, Tycho bombarded Izuku with meows. What happened? Who did this to you? He knew the boy couldn't understand what exactly he was asking, but he didn't care. He wanted to know who did this to his brother. After the pressure disappeared, Izawa knew it was too late to follow the kid. But that didn't mean that he could tear into the number 2 hero. He was physically pulled away from the number 2 hero before he could strangle him. He was absolutely furious with the hero. Who the hell just attacks a child with a full-blown attack like that? AI, Eraserhead, calmed down. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘, who had pulled him away, Whisper yelled. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 hadn't seen what happened because of the smoke. I won't fucking calm down. He just hit Spirit with a fireball. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 almost let him go at that, but he kept his composure. Though barely. We can talk about this at the station. 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 responded. Nezu had heard the news of what happened to Midoriya when Izawa came stomping into the teacher's lounge after a police chase. Izawa was furious, and Nezu could say that he was as well. But his first concern was to text Midoriya to see if he was okay. He knew that the boy had a healing quirk, but he didn't know how bad the burns were. Healing quirks have limitations. He got no response. Until the next day when Midoriya responded with a short message. Midoriya, I heard what happened from young Izawa. Are you okay? Physically, exhausted, and scarred. My quirk apparently has a limit. All my skin is healed, but a few areas have scars, specifically over my torso. My quirk couldn't heal them, oh dear. He quietly said to himself before responding. I am so sorry you had to deal with that, and that you had to learn your quirk had a limit. It's not your fault. Don't be sorry. A week after the incident, the vigilante was nowhere to be seen. Izawa was becoming nervous, until he received a message from an unknown number with a photo attached. I lived, bitches. Izawa sighed in relief, before a thought crossed him. How in the hell did he get my number? Age 13. Izawa was currently sitting in the teacher's lounge thinking over both the Spirit case and the Midoriya case. So far there was nothing new in the Midoriya case. The kid hadn't been seen in over a year, and nothing new about him had popped up. The case was going cold, and the man was getting worried. We've seen nothing. I hope the kid's alright. Izawa sighed. He hoped that something about the kid would pop up soon. With his other troubling case, the Spirit case, that kid hadn't been seen outside in 2 weeks since the incident. Though, he could understand why. He is more than likely in recovery. Though the image he sent, he still didn't know how the problem child had gotten his number, had him wearing his gear, which must be painful over his burns. Maybe he just used a pre-made photo to send. He had responded to the vigilante, but so far, he had gotten no response. Sighing a second time, Izawa let his head down on the table in front of him. I just wish the Spirit would turn himself in. He's a child. The court should be lenient on him. Nah, who am I kidding? They could care less if you are young. It all depends on public backlash, and with the word vigilante involved, the public won't have any backlash. Maybe I am thinking about this wrong. Then a realization, no, a possible solution, struck him. Of course, Spirit was a child. While he knew this, a good part of him had never realized that he had been approaching the situation wrong. I've been chasing after him and trying to get him to either turn himself in or get directly arrested. That was the wrong way to go about this. Izuku hadn't, well more like couldn't, leave his apartment for a week since the incident. Taiko would literally use his pressure if he even attempted to leave. It was a good thing he kept his fridge stocked, and that his phone hadn't been charged. If it hadn't been, he wouldn't be able to order food for delivery. He couldn't blame the cat. He would probably react the same if he were him. But being stuck at home left him with little to do. On the 6th day of absolute boredom, Izuku had gotten the idea to hack for the phone numbers of those that had been chasing him. And that is how he had ended up getting Eraserhead's number, and how he had ended up texting the man that photo of him in his vigilante gear, with the attached message. He, of course, at this point had a phone that couldn't be tracked. He may be tired from all the sleepless nights, but he wasn't stupid, nor tired, enough to use his trackable phone. The past few nights had been rather sleepless. He kept reliving the event, over and over. It sucked, but it wasn't like he wasn't used to nightmares. Nightmares, the creation of creatures who can sleep. A creation of the brain to help process an event, but rather than helping the traumatized, it makes it worse for them. A truly horrific conundrum brought upon by creation. It was now 8 days since the incident, and 1 day since he sent the message to Eraserhead had responded, but Izuku hadn't actually checked the message yet. After all, the original message that he had sent the man was for shits and giggles. There was no real point in looking at the message he had received in reply. It was probably something like, turn yourself in, kid, or how did you get my number? Both were very possible in his eyes, so he didn't bother checking it. Izuku sighed and turned over in his bed. Despite the event, he kinda wanted to do some vigilanting. It was currently night, so that meant that if Endeavor somehow decided to do a night patrol, which had only happened twice in the hero's entire history, he could see the man coming from a mile away. The only problem was whether or not Taiko would allow him to. The tabby honestly could be scary when using his pressure on you. Just thinking about it would send shivers down his spine. He is unnervingly scary when using it. Izuku stood up. Maybe he could convince Taiko to let him leave. It was worth a shot at least. Not worth it. Not worth it. He is fucking terrifying when mad. Holy shit. Once the second week had passed, Taiko finally let him patrol again. Freedom. During those 2 weeks, Izuku hadn't even been allowed to go to his bi-weekly meeting with Nezu. It was horrible. He still hadn't read the message from Eraserhead. In fact, he had completely forgotten about it. It wasn't that important to him, so he ended up forgetting about it. Currently, he was putting on his gear. He was honestly quite giddy about it. Oh, how I have missed the feeling of wearing this. He put his boots on, the last piece of gear, and hopped off his bed with a bright smile on his face. He felt so happy. He would get to patrol again. His patrols meant a lot to him. So now that he was running across the rooftops again, he was happy. Very happy. In fact, he wasn't technically even running, he was skipping. He was just so happy that Taiko finally let him leave. I understand why he made me stay home, but boy am I glad I can finally leave, he thought cheerfully. In the distance he heard a sound. He didn't even need his headset to hear it. That was a gunshot. He had only encountered people with guns occasionally. They weren't as common as they could be. He knew he had to be cautious. He rushed silently to where the gunshot had originated from and found 2 criminals in the middle of a fight to the death. One of them had some form of gun quirk, where their right hand was a gun, and the other, who had a gunshot wound in the left arm, seemed to have a form of telekinesis quirk and a large knife. Gun hand shot at telekinesis, but every shot missed as they used their quirk to alter the trajectories of the bullet. Gun hand was becoming frustrated, and Izuku saw this as the time he should step in. Despite both of them being criminals, there was no need for someone to die. He hopped off the rooftop and onto Gun Hand's back, toppling them down. He then turned to Telekinesis, who began stammering. Reaper, can't they call me by the name the police call me? The whole underground thought we were killed by Endeavor. Yeah, like that pathetic excuse for a hero can truly take me down. He responded, letting his boot sit on Gun Hand's head. They were trying to struggle, but the boot stopped them from getting up. Telekinesis took a step back, taking a defensive stance. Though they were shaking, am I really that scary to minor criminals like this? You know how this will end. Just let me tie you up and you won't get hurt. Izuku spoke calmly. It wasn't like he hadn't gotten criminals to let themselves be tied up before, but those happened because they had witnessed 4 or 5 of their buddies get taken down. Never because they had only seen one person get taken down. He really didn't want to fight them. They had a telekinesis quirk and a knife. He really didn't want a knife to the gut. Again, yes, he healed, but it was still painful. They stammered more before reluctantly holding out their arms to allow for Izuku to tie them up. Izuku tied both criminals up, and then called the police with a little, "Yoo-hoo, I've got some criminals tied up over here at 20th Street. Is that you, Spirit?" The voice on the other side asked, though they both knew the answer. Izuku left the scene before the police arrived. He didn't feel like being chased today, or for any matter, seeing the police at all. He felt like it would be too draining for him right now, with their constant turn yourself in, or don't try to escape. Currently, he was just sitting on a rooftop a few blocks down. He was enjoying the breeze. The breeze was quite cool and calming. He heard footsteps resounding on the same rooftop he was on. Of course, the one time I turn off my headset is the one time I need it on, he thought as he quickly stood up and faced whoever it was. Oh shit, I was enjoying the breeze. Why did you have to show up? Calm down. How in the ever-living hell am I supposed to calm down when you, the guy who has been trying to catch me for years now, are here? Izuku growled out. What are you doing here, Eraserhead? He didn't hate the man, but he was getting on his last nerve with how often he would appear to try to catch him. Izuku subconsciously reached back for his scythe. Whoa, as I said, calm down. The scythe is not necessary, Eraser replied in a rather calm but gruff voice. Izuku just raised an eyebrow. So far Eraserhead hadn't tried to use his capture weapon, nor had he tried to tell him to turn himself in. The only question on the boy's mind was, why? Age 13, realizing your mistakes and bettering yourself based on those mistakes can be one of the best forms of self-care. Acknowledge you aren't perfect and further yourself in a way that builds you up to the top, instead of assuming you are already there. It may be impossible to truly reach that top, but at least you will be able to say that you tried. Not many can truly say that. Author Aizawa could tell the boy was obviously confused, likely because I am not trying to capture him. He couldn't blame the boy. For the past almost 2 years, he had been trying and failing to capture him. I am not here to capture you. He spoke again. It was true, and Spirit could tell that too. Though the young vigilante was obviously still skeptical, he still knew that the statement wasn't false. Spirit backed up a bit before speaking in his usual, distorted voice. Why? The kid was clearly trying to analyze the situation. His visible, dark, possibly green, eyes were looking around, checking for signs of anything. Because, kid, I realized that I may have misjudged how to go about this situation. Spirit narrowed his eyes. I thought that outright capturing you was the best way to bring you in safely. The vigilante raised an eyebrow but didn't speak up, so Aizawa decided to continue. And as you know, that has not worked out. The kid let out a small chuckle at that. Definitely hasn't worked out, Spirit whispered. And neither has trying to convince you, Aizawa continued. Spirit nodded, and his eyes crinkled as if smirking, which the kid probably was smirking. So, he paused, figuring out the best way to word this. I think it would be better for me to genuinely stop trying to catch you. Spirit's eyes widened before asking, what do you mean by that? What I mean is that I am not going to actively try to catch you. But 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗟𝗘 doesn't know that. The vigilante tilted his head and prompted him to continue. So that means I may still be called in to catch you. He stopped for a second, though, he quieted. I won't actually be trying. Maybe chase you for a few blocks, then say that I lost you, or that you managed to release that pressure of yours. The kid seemed to chuckle, as if that last part was funny. Aizawa didn't get what was funny about it but didn't ask about it. Why? Spirit paused. Why should I trust you on that? There's nothing I can say to make you trust me. But after what happened 2 weeks ago, I decided to stop trying to catch you. The kid shivered after the slight mention of the incident. Speaking of that, you don't look too injured. Do you have some form of super healer as a contact? The kid chuckled nervously. You could say that. Kid, I'm glad you survived that. I was genuinely worried about what that dick of a hero did to you. Spirit laughed for a second before sending a suspicious glance. What? I've never liked that man, and what he did was horrendously wrong on all levels. Yeah, he's a bad hero with a high kill rate. The vigilante replied quietly. Aizawa wished he could comfort the kid, but right now the kid probably would not trust him enough for most of the traditional methods. Izuku had no clue how to feel about this situation. Supposedly Eraserhead would stop trying to actually catch him, which made no sense. It was obvious that the man didn't want him to be a vigilante. So why is he saying all this? Is it a ruse? His kill rate is well above most supervillains. The hero muttered. He genuinely disdains endeavor. Not that I blame him, but most don't. Anyways, as I said, kid, I was worried during that week. When you texted me I was so relieved, also confused, but mostly relieved. Eraserhead looked directly at him. I won't ask you how you got my number, though it's weird, but don't ever give me such a scare again. Izuku sighed. He's been lectured for the gazillionth time these past 2 weeks. Taiko, while I can't stand him fully, has done enough lecturing. I don't want to hear more. Not like I decided to give you a scare intentionally. I wish I could have gone patrolling during these past 2 weeks. The text was for shits and giggles. You wished you could have gone patrolling, even though you just got blasted by a giant fireball. Yep, but I was forced to stay home. He grumbled. Whoever kept you home did good. In fact, I wish they kept you home indefinitely. Haha, nope. They have the sense to know they can't stop me forever. His voice changer switched to auto-tune at the end, making his sing-song voice sound weird and funny. I wish they had the sense to keep you home. Yeah, no, I would not want to be stuck with takeout food the rest of my life. Takeout? Izuku's eyes widened. I practically just revealed I am the one getting my food. Shouldn't you have parents getting your food? Izuku had to force down a flinch. No, I mean yes, but, you see, my mom is staying home with me. Don't ask, don't ask, don't ask, don't ask. What about your other parent? Izuku froze, but he noted that Eraserhead didn't immediately assume that Izuku's other parent was a dude. He didn't have to lie about this part. Well, the father part, he died years ago. It's just me and my mom. Oh, Eraserhead looked like he just hit a puppy. Sensing what the hero was about to say, he interrupted. There is no need to say sorry. It happened a long time ago. 6.5 years ago. Still, losing a parent isn't a great feeling. No, it isn't. And Izuku knew that quite well. He really wished this conversation hadn't turned to him talking about his parents. Izuku and Eraserhead continued to talk about various topics. It was mostly Eraser talking though. Eventually the hero left, having to complete his patrol. Izuku couldn't complete his thought, as it was almost 1 a.m. While he usually stayed up later, he felt mentally exhausted from this night. 4 days later, Izuku was meeting with Nezu for the first time in over 2 weeks. He was ecstatic. While the rat could be scary at times, he genuinely enjoyed hanging out with him. He hasn't told Nezu that he had spoken with Eraserhead, nor did he think Eraserhead told the rat himself, considering he didn't want it known to the world that he wasn't actively trying to catch him. It wasn't that he didn't trust Nezu with that info. He trusts Nezu as much as he trusts Taiko, he just didn't feel that info to be necessary. Izuku was currently waiting while bouncing on the balls of his feet. The last year plus of knowing Nezu had helped him a lot with analysis. While his analysis had been great to begin with, the rat ended up helping him upgrade his analysis almost tenfold. He also just genuinely enjoyed the rat's company. Excited, aren't you? Nezu's voice suddenly appeared from behind him and Izuku jumped, having not heard him. Wait, no, don't answer that. I can see it written all over your face and body language. First I must ask, are you okay after what happened? I cannot lie to him and say yes, he always knows when I am lying. No, I still get nightmares over the event. Izuku perked up, but my body feels fine. The scars feel weird, since I have never had scars before, but overall my body feels brand new. 𝗧𝗓 chuckled. If your nightmares give you too much trouble, or if your scars bother you too much, just tell me. I'm a licensed therapist. Izuku's eyes widened before realizing he's hyper-intelligent. It makes sense that he would gain a degree and license himself as a therapist, especially since he is also a principal of an entire school. And I have burn scar cream that you can use. Izuku nodded, but didn't respond about getting either. Over the next few hours, the two talked about various things, like how a hero that had debuted the other day was doing, and about how some older heroes recently retired. They also talked about various hero news, and about how Izuku's gear is going. They both watched a hero fight a few streets down and chuckled at how the villain seemed so confused and the actions of one of the heroes who was using a tactic to confuse villains. Act wild and crazy. It almost always threw off villains, and came in use when a hero knew that a villain's quirk was strong against theirs. Unfortunately, the tactic itself wasn't too common, as most heroes cared more about their image than actually taking down the criminals. 𝗧𝗓 watched as Izuku carefully analyzed both sides' quirks, how they worked, their weaknesses, their strengths, and their fighting style. Izuku was writing down all his notes, though not in Japanese or even English, but rather a code the two had come up with and memorized to ensure that if the notes came into the wrong hands, they couldn't be used to take anyone down. Soon it was 4 p.m. in the afternoon. They had begun talking at 11 a.m., and 𝗧𝗓 needed to return to UA. He probably needed to return hours ago. Oh well, it was fun talking to you, Midoriya, but I'm afraid I have to start heading back to UA. 𝗧𝗓 spoke. The young vigilante nodded. I understand. They both began separating on the rooftop, 𝗧𝗓 going one way, Izuku the next. See you later, I mean NEZU. Izuku could hear 𝗧𝗓's cackles as he ran away embarrassed since he almost called 𝗧𝗓 dad. I guess basically having him as the only truly trustworthy adult figure in my life equated him to being my dad now. 𝗧𝗓 walked into UA. He wasn't cackling no more, but he was still chuckling. He was also endeared, having not expected Midoriya, no scratch that anyone, whether by accident or not, to try to call him dad. He made his way into the teacher's lounge and over to the fridge, where one of his many snacks could be found, and grabbed one out. What is he chuckling about? Shinsu, who had come with his fathers, Aizawa and Yamada, since his school was closed for the day, asked his fathers. At this point, he does it so often, it's probably about that mysterious interesting someone that he has mentioned before. Aizawa answered. Oh, the kid nodded. Is that a good thing? And Yamada tried to respond, but 𝗧𝗓 interrupted him. Yes. The rat looked over at them and Yamada seemed to shrink under his cheerful gaze. I was almost called dad today. At that point, everyone in the room, which at that moment was roughly 70% of the teachers, looked over at him in shock. Aizawa promptly got up and left the room with a, I'm done. Shinsu followed him out in a rush. How much do they trust you? Yamada exclaimed while the rest of the room delved into chaos. Too bad for them that within a short year or two the chaos would only get worse. And it would all start with a short green-haired boy. Age 13, Izuku's schedule changed rapidly within the next few months. He now would occasionally talk with Eraserhead while on patrols, which he found weird to do. And by occasionally it was more like at least once every 3 days. It was strange, but at least he wasn't being chased all the time. Another change to his schedule was that he was now meeting with 𝗧𝗓 once a week, instead of once every 2 weeks, which surprised him, considering 𝗧𝗓 has a school to run, and he always met him during the day. Granted, the school was run by heroes, but all the students were practically granted access to their quirks, unlike in typical schools. But still, 𝗧𝗓's schedule should be busier than it seems to be. Either that, or his teachers are too scared of him to bring it up. That was highly possible. Izuku shook his head. Now wasn't the time to be thinking of any of that. Currently, he was sat on a rooftop watching a group of villains and criminals meeting up. It was strange. Typically, groups out in the open were in sizes of 4-5 people, especially in highly populated areas such as this one. But no, this group was huge, way too big for him to handle on his own. There were roughly 25, maybe 30 of them, and they all seemed to be talking about one thing. Arson, specifically, the arson of hero agencies and police departments. Who thinks of arson in December? This wasn't the first time Izuku had come across a group that's goal was arson, but it was the first time he had seen so many people in a group wanting to commit it. From what he could tell, at least 4 people within the group had fire quirks. Those 4 were flaunting their fire quirks. He figured there were probably more with fire quirks, but those ones were obvious about it. Suddenly, a white-haired man joined the group, and by suddenly, he meant suddenly. 1 second the man was there, across the street. The next, he was beside the group. A form of speed quirk. What's going on? He peered closer over the edge. Almost everyone around the man rapidly moved out of his way as he appeared. One didn't. Facing 𝗧𝗓𝗧𝗟𝗘. Good. Almost all of you still know your manners. The ice-cold tone of the leader sent chills down his spine. The white-haired guy turned to face the brave one. I wasn't going to move for someone I don't know. said the one who still hadn't moved. Their long curly black hair fell down past their shoulders, almost reaching their elbows. Their eyes were a stark gold. A smaller person nearby hissed at them. How can you not know him? Izuku was lucky he had his headset on or he wouldn't have been able to hear it. Golden eyes looked over at the small person. I'm not too, what would you call it, great at remembering nobodies. At that the leader stepped forward with a snarl. Everyone but MX. Gold eyes flinched and stepped back. They were literally talking about arson before, but now it looks like there is going to be a fight. A big fight. Sir Whitehair was obviously someone big, considering he could get a whole crowd to flinch. He has to be pretty well known in the underground. Gold eyes narrowed their eyes at the leader. I have no clue who you are. They paused. But I do know who I am, they cackled. I, on many occasions, have been called Fright. Several gasps came from the crowd of criminals and villains. But Izuku was confused. I have never heard of them before, but many people down there have. Was this group not organized before? Or did they just join in because of the arson? Ah, so you're one of the many troublemakers that has been causing trouble around here. Whitehair spoke, seemingly not surprised. In fact, he seemed like he didn't care at all. Fright cackled. Do you know why they call me Fright? They paused and readied their stance. After no response, they continued, it's because I can do this. Rapidly, many of the nearby criminals screeched or ran. Whitehair's eyes widened briefly, but then he laughed. It was a crazed laugh, the kind that easily puts anyone into fight or flight mode. Izuku was confused. However, he had seen nothing going on. He had no clue why any of the criminals ran, nor why some of them screamed. Perhaps some form of sensory illusion. He must have just been out of range. You think bringing forth my nightmares can stop me? Whitehair grinned. Considering you don't know me, I won't take that as an insult. But allow me to demonstrate myself. The remaining criminals all paled. A few tried running. Those who tried running didn't make it far, as Whitehair quickly moved and returned them all back by his side. It happened quicker than a blink of the eye. He hadn't seen the man move to grab the others. My quirk is known as Duo for a reason. He grabbed two of them with his hands and let his hands sit on the shoulders, his index and middle fingers raised. Slowly he placed those fingers down on the two criminals' shoulders, based on the name a double-faceted quirk. Before Izuku could even blink, both of them crumbled apart into rock-like chunks, effectively fossilizing them, skin and all. Izuku was horrified. While he had seen many deaths since the first one he saw, none of them had come close to that one in terms of horror factor. Until now, this man was dangerous. I'm called Shifter. Why? Shifter spoke up after a moment. And I am heir to the Kraken throne. Kraken is the one who fought Dad and gave him those scars on his arms. He is also the one who killed Mom. Fright's eyes widened a bit before a smirk fell upon their face. Well, Shifter, I had been trying to find your group for a while now. Didn't think they would be talking about committing mass arson. They paused. Arson wasn't really Kraken's thing, was it? Then again, he was always fascinated with Dragon. Izuku narrowed his eyes as his father's hero name was mentioned. Even before Dragon was a hero. What in the hell is that supposed to mean? This is all irrelevant. Of course it is. I got off track. Shifter. Fright smiled a sickeningly large smile. I wish to challenge one of your pillars for their spot. Shifter narrowed his eyes, but seemed intrigued by the idea. He turned to some of the remaining few villains and criminals. Quickly most of them moved out of the way to reveal 4 people. The pillars. All of you, step forward. Shifter called out to them. All 4 stepped forward calmly. Which of you will go against him willingly? None of them moved. Fine. Jackal, you step up. All of them used code names, not surprising. The one seemingly called Jackal walked up. They looked confident. Jackal, you will step up to the challenge. You know what happens if you lose this fight. You step down as a pillar. Shifter growled out before looking over to Fright. It is customary in our pillar challenges for the fight to be non-lethal. You can do any dirty trick, but you may not kill, or you will not become a pillar. The loser, if a pillar, becomes a low-ranked member. Fright looked ready to speak up, but Jackal spoke instead. Fright. They howled. You seem unhappy at the no-kill rule, but being a low-ranked member is a punishment worse than death, which is why I won't bow. Izuku ended up watching as the fight started, and as it finished, Jackal had been horribly defeated. They were currently knocked out, having received a particularly bad punch that set their jaw out of place. Everyone, Shifter yelled out, welcome our newest pillar. Fright, glad to be here. Fright freakishly smiled. Shifter looked over at Fright. Now, to lay some groundwork, don't question my authority. Not like you did earlier. Fright just grinned. They are all crazy. Now, back to the task we had started before Fright showed up. The leader smirked. Time for some arson. A howl of cheers came from the remaining criminals and villains. How the hell are there no heroes watching this? How indeed. Izuku followed the group a bit before sending out a text to Nezu to found a giant group of villains and criminals that are about to start committing arson across Musutafu, possibly a bigger area. They have talked about burning down hero agencies and police departments. Thanks for notifying me. I'll begin spreading the news out amongst the heroes. Where are they currently located? And have they mentioned a name to their group? This is where they are currently, and they are headed south. I think they call themselves pillars, but that may just be a rank. I have the names of their leader, ex-leader, and the name of a few members. Oh, and some of their quirks. Pillars. That isn't good. Send those names. Might help us take them down. On it, their leader's name is Shifter. His quirk seems to be a double-faceted quirk, having two separate abilities mashed together. One is a speed-like ability. The other is some form of crumble fossilization that seems to require the touch of possibly 4 of his fingers to activate. Midoriya, I need you to get out of there. Shifter is a lesser-known, but powerful villain. It's no surprise he took the spot as leader. I figured he was bad. I'll back off a bit, but someone needs to keep an eye on the group. Anyways, he called himself the heir to the Kraken throne, which is definitely not good. That info is new. We knew he was connected to the pillars, but not as the heir. Anyways, on to the next member. They are a brand new member. I watched them join and defeat another member. They are called Fright, and their quirk, based on what people screamed when they activated it, can bring forth nightmares. Anyways, it seems that they may have to be aware that you are there, cause I didn't get affected. They're a rather new criminal. We didn't know about their quirk. I'll warn the nearby heroes. Some heroes are getting rather close, so you should get away. They will likely try to take you in. On it. Oh yeah, many of them have fire-related quirks, so some heroes should be wary. Got it, be safe. Izuku fled the scene, feeling it okay enough to leave the group unsupervised. He quickly decided to send texts to Eraser as well. To change my name back. Eraser, there's a large group of villains called the Pillars. Their leader is a villain known as Shifter. On my way, I've already notified someone who told heroes in the area, so you shouldn't be going in alone. How? You know what? Never mind, guessing you left the area to avoid being caught by nearby heroes. Yup. Good. They may not have been kind to you if they had to spot you. This group will be taken care of. Seems like a ton of heroes decided to arrive. With that, Izuku went to his apartment, changed, and settled down next to Taiko, who was asleep on the couch. He had been watching that group for well over 2 hours. He was in need of some sleep. In the end, nearly all of the criminals and villains were caught, except for Shifter, Fright, and the 3 other pillars.